Chapter 210. Yi Zhifan knew that he couldn't persuade him to stay, so he smiled and said, "That's good. You came to the village on such a hot day. You must have something urgent to attend to. I'll have a drink with you when I'm free." After watching Secretary Wu get into the car, Yi Zhifan's smile immediately disappeared. He glared at his wife and said to Yi Ying, "Look after your mother. I'll deal with you when I get back." It was time for the meeting, so he had to rush back. Yi Ying was always afraid of him. Hearing this, her back broke out in a cold sweat and she nodded timidly. Suppressing his anger, Yi Zhifan didn't even have the mood to attend the meeting. Whenever he thought of his wife's complacent look outside, he felt his heart burn fiercely. He had a belly full of anger that he couldn't vent. Yi Qian, the wretched girl she kept calling, had already gone abroad and won an award. People's Daily even published a photo and highlighted the students who won the gold medal in bold. Yi Qian was one of them. They even used the phrase, "turning the tide," to describe Yi Qian's performance in the exam. Let's see if he still has the face to talk about Yingying's exam results. Let's see if he still has the face to talk about how amazing his daughter is. Let's see if he still has the face to step on Yi Qian's face and make himself look good. Originally, he wanted to come back after work to scold his wife. Who knew that after the meeting, he would call Yi Zhifan to go to the city? The matter that had been hanging in the air for half a year finally had an answer. He was promoted from deputy to official. On the same day, he had to report to the city and study for half a month. He could only come back when school started. The success of his official career made Yi Zhifan temporarily put this matter aside. He packed his luggage and rushed to the city. In Shuka village, Uncle Zhen and Principal Qin came back from fishing early in the morning. Both of them were full of smiles. They knew about Yi Qian's results before Yi Zhifan did. At the same time, they also knew about the dangerous incident that happened that night. Although it was dangerous, when they thought about how the military knew about it and recorded Yi Qian's achievements in the file, the two elders were pleasantly surprised. Little Yi is brave and careful. Once she sets her mind on something, there's nothing she can't do. Old man Zhen dealt with the big grass carp that he had caught early in the morning and laughed out loud. Even the deep wrinkles on his face looked like blooming flowers. "I feel at ease now." Ever since Principal Qin returned from the province, he and Uncle Zhen, to live in Shuka village, and go to the military once a week or so. Hearing that, a smile appeared on his wrinkled face. He sighed and said, "A 4-year plan is a long time, but half a year will pass in the blink of an eye. Little Yi will only be with us for a year. The rest will have to wait until the winter and summer holidays." There was no high school in town. If there was a high school, with little Ye's talent, she would not be held back if she went to high school in town. She was smart and eager to learn. No matter where she went, she wouldn't be bad. Uncle Zhen was already laughing. Children grow up. Sooner or later, she'll fly high. She can see further. She just has to come back to visit us occasionally. Don't restrict her. Although the time is short, we'll teach her strictly. If she studies seriously, she'll be admitted to school sooner or later. They removed the scales, dug out the innards, and washed the fish clean. Their lunch of braised fish was inevitable. Chapter 211. The two elders usually talked about Yi Qian. Other than that, they also talked about the training of some soldiers in the army. For the two elders, this kind of topic was their hope and spiritual sustenance. In the hotel, Yi Qian had already packed her luggage. She sat on the bed and looked at the letter that the front desk had just handed her. After a while, she finally tore up the envelope and the letter inside, and flushed them down the toilet. It was from Xia Jinyuan. It wasn't a letter, just a few words. He said that he wanted her to rest in Jing City for 2 days and that he could only go back to China after 2 days, so what if he went back to China? Dangerous men were like poison. She couldn't touch them, especially when this dangerous and poisonous man liked to show signs of ambiguity from time to time. This made her even more unwilling to have too much contact with him in her life. Without any hesitation or consideration, Yi Qian maintained her original attitude and insisted on staying away from Xia Jinyuan in her life. After shaking hands with the local Australian students one by one, the Chinese students finally embarked on their journey back to China under the guidance of Director Li and the other 3 teachers. It was 11 a.m. when they arrived in Jing City. Yi Qian didn't plan to stay in Jing City for too long. Her plan was to fly back to the province at 2 p.m. If time didn't allow for it, she would rest in the province for one night and take the train back to the city early the next morning. Not only did she have to travel back to town from the city, but she also had to take a bus back to town. Don't think it's over. From town to the village, she still had to take a bus. Old people would probably feel their scalps tingle when they heard this, but for Yi Qian, she couldn't wait to take the train back to the city as soon as she arrived in the province. She was anxious to return home. Director Li tried her best to persuade her to stay in Jing City for a few more days and visit their school, but was rejected by Yi Qian. This made the eloquent Director Li so worried that her hair turned white. "You little girl, why don't you understand?" Teacher Li took a big gulp of water. He wanted to persuade Yi Qian to come down, but when he saw the sly smile in her eyes, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Good girl, are you pretending to be confused in front of your teacher?" He was smart and well-mannered, and he handled the relationship between students quite well. He was not arrogant, and he was not arrogant because of his strengths. He really did not want to give up on such a good seedling so easily. When Yi Qian heard that he wanted to continue, he stopped feigning ignorance. He smiled and said, "Director Li, to tell you the truth, if there was a high school in our town, I would have studied there as well." Why was that? Everyone is racking their brains to get into a top school. Why is it so weird when it's your turn? I can tell you that in the whole of Beijing, our school has the strongest teaching staff. Not to mention Hua University and Shi University, most of the students who study abroad have a bonus. In response to Director Li's well-meaning advice, Yi Qian smiled faintly and replied, "You're honey, you're arsenic." He didn't say anything else. This was something that was completely impossible. He could only thank Director Li for his kindness. "You little girl, you really do have a lot of ideas." Director Li didn't try to persuade her anymore. He sighed heavily and said to the 2 boys, Gao Yang and Wang Mo, "Take care of the girls on the road. When you arrive in the province, remember to call me to let me know you're safe." Chapter 212. Wang Mo chuckled. "Don't worry, I'll definitely call you." Since the 3 of them were traveling together, Director Li wasn't too worried. However, he still called Teacher Zhu from the provincial high school, who was responsible for bringing the 3 of them to school. He told him what time the students would be arriving at the provincial high school and personally escorted them to the departure lounge before leaving. "After I get off the plane, I'll go directly to the train station to see if there are any train tickets back to the city tonight." As soon as they boarded the plane, Yi Qian told Gao Yang her plan. "I can go back alone, and I want to go back earlier." She hadn't trained in a long time, so she was very anxious to go back. Gao Yang glanced at her and frowned slightly. He pursed his lips and said, "There are tickets. Let's go back together." He didn't hear her mention that if she hadn't been able to get the tickets, she would have gone back alone. "That's fine too." Yi Qian nodded slightly. Although there was no misunderstanding like before, she wasn't very interested in closing the distance between them. It was enough to maintain a casual friendship. Although she wasn't as cold to him as before, she didn't want to be friends either. Gao Yang, who realized this, felt a little bitter. He didn't say anything more and closed his eyes to pretend to rest. After Wang Mo and Yi Qian chatted for a while, Wang Mo also yawned and closed his eyes to sleep. Only Yi Qian, although she also closed her eyes, her mind was clear. She didn't feel sleepy at all when she thought about how she would soon be able to immerse herself in the intense training. As she wished, when they arrived at the provincial capital at 5:30 p.m., Gao Yang immediately called to book the train tickets for 7:45 p.m. The two of them didn't even meet Mr. Zhu and rushed to the train station without stopping. From Australia to Beijing, then to the province, the city, the town, and the village. Yi Qian spent a total of 2.5 days on the road. At noon, the sun was so hot that even the cicadas were resting. The entire village was extremely quiet. Even the dogs were lying under the shade of the trees, panting heavily. When Yi Qian walked into the peach forest with her luggage, Xia Jinyuan stood at the hotel where he and Yi Qian had agreed to meet. "No one contacted you. Are you sure?" Xia Jinyuan frowned and looked at Han Zheng in disbelief. He pressed his lips together and asked, "Are you sure no one called you when you were at the nightclub?" Han Zheng was on the verge of tears. He patted his chest and swore, "Absolutely not. They were watching him 24 hours a day. That little girl of yours definitely didn't contact me, I guarantee it." What was this? Could it be that his brother's words were false? The aggrieved Han Zheng pretended to cry and said sadly, "Why would I lie to you? Let me tell you, that little girl is not interested in you at all. The great young master Xia also has a time when he is despised by others. My heart is really, really fucking happy." Amidst his childhood friend's gloating laughter, Xia Jinyuan's face gradually tensed up. The little girl didn't come, so the next time they met would be difficult. It might be a few months, or a few years. Xia Jinyuan was originally supposed to join the team at the end of the year. Now, because of Operation Pebble, the transfer order was sent to his original unit the day before yesterday and he would be transferred to the new unit the next day. Each unit was responsible for special missions, such as war zone operations, overseas pursuits, foreign assassinations, intelligence spying, and so on, which were classified as Red Level 1, Snowfield Brigade. Since she didn't come, Xia Jinyuan could only leave Beijing with regret and go to the Snowfield Brigade. Chapter 213. Before leaving, Xia Jinyuan wrote a letter to Yitong's school, hoping that she would receive his letter when school started. He left without saying goodbye. Only the little girl was familiar with this kind of thing. He didn't want to learn from her. The letter arrived at school 2 days before school started. After returning to the mountains and arriving at the army, Yi Qian fought with the soldiers all day long. She didn't even miss her daily exercises and training. When she looked up from the target, the days passed by like flipping through a book. In the blink of an eye, it was time to report back to school and usher in the 3rd year of middle school. She still couldn't bear to leave the army, causing the soldiers in the army to laugh and tease Yi Qian, who was like a little sister to them. It was noon when she left. Dozens of people sent her off at the same time. The scene was so spectacular that the regiment commander laughed out loud. He said to the political commissar, "This little girl was born to be a soldier. How can you tell that she's a little girl? For the sake of training, she cut her silky long hair just like that. Now, she looks just like a boy." He paused and added, "It's just that her skin is a little too pale. She's been under the sun for more than 20 days, but I don't see her tan. If the little girl really turns into a coal under the sun, she'll cry." The political commissar laughed. There wasn't a single female soldier in the army. Even the military doctor was a man. With Yi Qian, the little girl's arrival had the effect of balancing yin and yang. Although ordinary people weren't allowed to enter the military grounds, Yi Qian was different. Even the military took note of her. When they found out that she was here, they even called and told her to teach her well. The little girl had a good temper and was hard-working. She was like a piece of gold in the army, shining wherever she went. Any army would be willing to open their doors and welcome such a talent. More than 10 days passed by quickly. Looking at this group of soldiers, he knew how much they couldn't bear to see her leave. Not only the soldiers, but even he, the political commissar, couldn't bear to see her leave. They walked all the way to the entrance of the barracks. Only then did the soldier, who couldn't go out, pass Yi Qian's luggage to her. He patted her shoulder as if she was a comrade and said with a smile, "Come back on Saturday and Sunday. There are a lot of pheasants in the mountains in autumn. When the time comes, we'll carry the company commander and roast some pheasants." "Okay, then I'll have to bring a few more bags of cumin powder. Sprinkle a handful of cumin powder on it when it's cooked. That's called fragrant." Yi Qian had cut his hair as soon as he entered the army, revealing his exquisite and flawless facial features. His eyes were as dazzling as the stars in the sky, and his smile was as bright as the morning sun. "Wait for me. See you on Saturday morning." Compared to the colorful life outside, Yi Qian loved this blood-boiling land more. When she walked out of the barracks, she turned back to look at the tall figures dressed in army green who seemed to blend into the mountains. Even the corners of her eyes were smiling. One by one, they stood ramrod straight like rows of spears at the entrance of the barracks. Even if it was resting time, they were always ready. In the army, the most common saying was, "Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in an hour." The most discussed topic was, protect the country. No matter what era it was, those rows of army green figures would always be the most adorable people of that era. After leaving the army at noon, they took a village car to town in the afternoon. The people in the car were either from the same village or from the neighboring villages. They talked about their hometown all the way to town. Chapter 2:14. My chickens are hanging outside. They can't run away. I have to give them away. When the bus stopped midway, some villagers, under the urging of the conductor, didn't forget to remind them that they couldn't let anything happen to the chickens they brought into the town. The ticket seller was actually the driver's wife. She took the money and said, "Who wants your chickens? They're hanging in the back. It smells like chicken poop. Who can smell it in the summer? Get on, get on. Don't dawdle." It was common to see chickens and ducks when visiting relatives in town. There were many students on the bus. They chatted and chatted all the way to town. The buses driving in the town were not good cars. They were all old minibuses that had been eliminated by the city. There was no air conditioning in summer and no heating in winter. Everyone sitting in the bus hated that they could not tear down the windows. Gao Yang had been waiting for a long time. There were only 3 buses from Shuku village to town. One in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the afternoon. The first 2 buses did not see Yi Qian, so it had to be this bus. Soon, a shabby minibus came from afar. Gao Yang put some money on the counter of the canteen and bought 2 mung bean popsicles. He pushed the bicycle with one hand and walked over, but after a few steps, he stopped. He saw Yi Ying and the mayor's wife, who had been in the limelight for the past 10 days. Yi Qian, who was sitting by the window, got off the bus. He felt that today was not a good day to go out. He saw the fashionably dressed mother and daughter, Sun Dongqing and Yi Ying, getting on the bus. They were talking to a woman who said that she wanted to take care of her chickens. It turned out that the woman's sister was giving birth at the town hospital. The mayor's wife, Sun Dongqing, had helped a little. She was here to thank them personally. Yi Qian did not plan to avoid them. So what if he bumped into them? When they got to school, she and Yi Ying would be in the same classroom. They would not see each other all day. How could she avoid them? Although the sun was setting in the west in the afternoon, it was still hot. Yi Jian glanced at Yi Ying, who was obviously impatient but still had a fake smile on her face. She took her luggage and left the car. Yi Ying had lost her patience. Her father had just taken office and needed the support of the villagers. Would she come out for a few chickens and ducks? Being close to the people. She had no choice. Over the phone, her father had specifically said that she had to make the mother and daughter appear close to the people. Yi Ying, who was waving a paper fan in her hand, said a few words with a fake smile. She looked up slightly and saw a face that she hated for a long time. His gaze suddenly became exceptionally sharp, and fiercely swept over as if he were looking at an enemy. Every time she thought about the humiliation at the farm in the suburbs of the capital, she hated that she couldn't tear this face apart in her dreams. Yi Qian. She gritted her teeth and shouted in a low voice. Her cold voice was filled with coldness, but she didn't walk over. She just stared fiercely at him. Even on a hot day, the coldness in her eyes would cause goosebumps. She was still the same. A leopard could not change its spots. Yi Qian curled his lips. Facing Yi Ying's coldness, he returned a cold smile. His smile was as clear as water, filled with indifference and disdain. Sun Dongqing already had a conditioned reflex when she heard the name Yi Qian. She immediately shouted, "Where are you? Where is the wretched girl?" She looked up and saw Yi Qian grabbing his luggage and leaving the bus. She was furious. Like a weed on fire, it instantly started a prairie fire. "Wretched girl, stop right there. Do you still have any respect for your elders? Hey, where did all the reading go? You don't even have any respect for your elders." Chapter 215. After not seeing Yi Qian for a few months, and hearing her daughter say that she was bullied by Yi Qian at school today, Sun Dongqing was so pleased with herself that she wanted to teach Yi Qian a lesson. Yi Qian turned a deaf ear. She wanted to make a fool of herself in front of everyone, but she didn't want to. Of course, if she really wanted to make a fool of herself, she wasn't afraid to play along. He ignored her and didn't even look back. He was clearly ignoring her. Sun Dongqing thought about it. Which one of them didn't greet her with a smile in the past 10 days? Only this wretched girl dared to disobey her. She was so angry that she swung her arms and chased after him. Her reaction was so big that it made Yi Ying's heart sink. She thought to herself, "This is bad." She hurriedly chased after her and stopped her. She whispered, "Mom, we're on the streets. There are so many people coming and going. Don't embarrass Dad. Don't forget, Dad specifically told you not to." The mention of her husband made Sun Dongqing slam on the brakes. Her chubby body trembled a few times under her skirt before she managed to calm down. She glared at Yi Qian's back, her chest still heaving up and down violently. "Wretched girl, she's lucky." She cursed in a low voice before she stopped. Yi Qian, who had walked far away, could still hear her bad-mouthing her to the women in the neighboring village. She said that she didn't come back for the whole summer vacation, that she didn't come back at night, and that she didn't know where she went to fool around. She walked quickly and didn't see Gao Yang, who was pushing his bicycle, walk coldly behind Yi Ying. In the past, she only saw one side of it, but now she heard it for real. She saw it with her eyes, heard it with her ears, and felt it with her heart. Only then did she realize that some things were so unbearable. For example, this mayor's wife clearly didn't know anything, but she was still shamelessly talking nonsense and bad-mouthing Yi Qian. No matter how bad Yi Qian's relationship with your family is, at least I've never heard her talk behind your back. He spoke coldly, but his words were like thunder that exploded in Yi Ying's heart. Yi Ying's mind spun rapidly. How much did he hear, and what did he know? No, she had to divert his attention. Last time in the suburbs of the capital, he was especially cold to her. This time, she had to salvage her image no matter what. She restrained the shock on her face and slowly turned around to let her eyes be filled with surprise. Using a kind of natural joy that was just right, she said with surprise and joy, "When did you come back?" "Today." "Why did you come back so late?" Usually, whenever Gao Yiyang came back from the holidays, the first thing he would do was look for Yiying. "In the past, I was indeed stupid." Gao Yiyang looked coldly at Yiying, who had pretended that nothing had happened with just a turn of her body. His eyes were filled with mockery, both toward himself and Yiying. "Hearsay is false, but seeing is believing. For you, I don't only need to use my ears and eyes to verify, I also need to use my heart to observe you." The girl who had handed him a handkerchief when he was at his most embarrassing. Perhaps she had been kind at that moment, or perhaps she had just happened to pass by. She had handed him the handkerchief in order to improve her reputation in front of her classmates. Truth and falsehood, falsehood and truth. He couldn't see through Yiying like this, and he didn't want to see through her. The incident at the farm in the suburbs of the capital had already clearly seen her character. Now that she was saying these things, did she expect him to say something to make her apologize to Yi Qian? Chapter 216. She was afraid that even if she apologized, Yi Qian would not accept it. Sun Dongqing was confused. This boy was tall, good-looking, and fair. From the way he dressed, she could tell that he came from a rich family. Why couldn't she understand a single word he said? Gao Yang looked at the mayor's wife, who was looking at him suspiciously. She didn't seem to understand what was going on. He pursed his lips and suppressed the words he wanted to say. He said to Yiying coldly, "You're on your own now." Pushing the bicycle, Gao Yang didn't look at Yiying, whose eyes had turned red because of what he said. His cold eyes no longer had the faint joy he had when he saw Yiying. Because the last trace of love he had for her had been wiped clean by the incident at the farm in the suburbs of the capital. The love between a boy and a girl was always unavoidable. Perhaps, only through such experiences would one gradually grow and mature. "Gao Yang, what right do you have to say that to me? You bastard!" Yiying felt wronged. Seeing that he still didn't say anything to her, she couldn't continue to be dignified. She cried out, "What do you know? You don't know anything. What right do you have to say that to me? What right do you have to say that to me?" Yi Qian was so arrogant in class. He stole everything that belonged to her. Why didn't he stand up for her? Why did he participate in the mathematical Olympiad? He could have helped her deal with Yi Qian, but he didn't. Now, he even helped Yi Qian teach her a lesson. Who did he like? Yi Ying was so angry that she started crying, which made Sun Dongqing panic. Gao Yang. Wasn't this the boy that Ying always talked about when she came home? Even old Yi didn't say anything when he found out. It was as if he had silently agreed to the relationship between the two children. It was said that he came from a very, very rich family. Sun Dongqing, who didn't understand what was going on, didn't even know how to comfort her. She wondered if she should bring the boy back. She looked over and saw Gao Yang catch up with Yi Qian and hand him the popsicle. Great! If she still didn't understand what was going on, she would have eaten for decades in vain. Don't cry, Ying. Mom will stand up for you. Damned hoof, his guts were about to reach the heavens. You shameless thing, just wait for your mother to clean you up. She's so young and she already knows how to snatch men. Sun Dongqing, who had misunderstood, cursed in a low voice. For a moment, she forgot about the woman who was still holding the chicken in her hand. At this moment, how could he still remember? If not for Yi Ying crying, she would have chased after Yi Qian and Gao Yang. Yi Ying, who didn't dare to cry out loud on the street, turned around and ran back home. Sun Dongxing wanted to chase after her, but the woman with the chickens in her hands cried out a few times and stood there awkwardly, not knowing whether to leave or not. Just like that, she listened to the whole story. Yo, you haven't left yet. I have to go home. When children quarrel, adults have to worry. Sun Dongxing, whose face had darkened, forced a smile. She said a few words, took the chicken, and hurried home. Yi Ying locked herself in her room the moment she got home. She didn't even come out for dinner. The next morning, she didn't even have breakfast. She went to school with a pair of red and swollen eyes. Sun Dongxing, who hadn't slept the whole night, was afraid that Yi Ying would be late. When she heard the noise, she immediately got out of bed. Yi Ying was just about to go to school when she slammed the door. Damned hoof. Ying Ying was so angry that she didn't even eat breakfast. If I don't tidy up, she really thinks she's going to heaven. She muttered as she tidied up her clothes and hurried out. When the phone rang, she had just finished changing because she was in a hurry to go to school. She ignored it and went straight to school. Chapter 217. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Yi Qian was the first to run to the school. However, Principal Chen was even earlier than her. He held a letter in his hand and stood at the school gate, leisurely waiting for Yi Qian to come over. Not long after, he saw a figure in the school's summer uniform running over. Bathed in the morning sun, the figure was like a young eagle fluttering its wings. Although its wings were still tender, it could already fly freely under the blue sky and white clouds. He took out the letter and read it. When she was about to run past, he hid behind his back with his hands behind his back. His gaze was kind and encouraging as he waited for the young eagle to fly over. Yi Qian, who was drenched in sweat from running, had already seen the elder standing at the school gate. She ran a little faster. You're here so early. Are you here to welcome our new students? The admission of new students has always been handled by Dean Ku. I've been waiting for you. Principal Chen sized up the little girl whom he hadn't seen for a few days. He smiled and said, the army is really good at raising people. You've grown up again. As he spoke, he handed the letter over. Sender, Xia Jinyuan. Recipient, Yi Qian. Little girl, have you become pen pals with Major Xia? His words were strong and clear, yet he knew how to restrain himself. His words were like his person. This Major Xia seemed to treat little Yi differently. Yi Qian was a little surprised. He wrote to her. She took the letter and read it. It was indeed Xia Jinyuan's handwriting. She couldn't figure out why he would write to her out of the blue. She pretended to tear the letter and read it, but Principal Chen hurriedly stopped her. Read it later. I have something else to talk to you about first. Come, let's go to my office. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the school was still quiet. Registration was in the morning, the freshman assembly in the afternoon, and classes started the next day. The registration time was very tight, which was in line with Principal Chen's style of doing things. When they reached his office, he smiled and said, Secretary Wu from the city's education bureau is coming over today. He came over a while ago, but he didn't see you or me. He rushed back to the city for nothing. Make some preparations later and have a good chat with Secretary Wu. This girl had a mature personality and always kept a low profile in everything she did. Even though she had won the grand prize this time, she still acted as if nothing had happened and did what she had to do. Yi Ying, on the other hand, had made it into the top 10 of her grade in the final exam and made it known to the whole town. That child, if she didn't properly educate and nurture him, he might really be ruined by his mother. Yi Qian nodded and said with a smile, "All right, is there anything we need to pay attention to? That way, I can be mentally prepared." She had never experienced these things in her previous life. Even if she had to do it all over again, she had to learn it all over again. Moreover, if there was no need for them to meet, Principal Chin would definitely decline on her behalf. Now that he had personally told her about it, she had to be cautious. No need, it's because of your award, Anne." Principal Chen paused for a second, then the smile in his eyes deepened. "Also, it's about setting up an outstanding student scholarship in our city. The organizer, Mr. Gao, specifically mentioned your name to the mayor, saying that you were the one who suggested it." Speaking of this, Principal Chen felt proud. She was able to think of things that others couldn't. She was broad-minded, had a deep sense of righteousness, knew how to refuse, and was able to act appropriately. How could he and Uncle Jen not be proud of such a girl? However, this girl was able to keep her composure and didn't mention a word about it when she came back. No one knew that she had done something big without saying a word. Chapter 218. Yi Qian did not expect Father Gao to act so quickly. She joked, "Then I have to work harder and aim for the scholarship. Who knows, maybe I won't have to worry about tuition fees when I go to university." "Ha ha ha, little girl, that depends on what university you go to. If it's a military school, not only will they not charge you a single cent, they'll even give you an allowance." Principal Chen laughed. The little girl could be quite childish at times, and it was very interesting to watch. "Don't worry. As long as you get into a military school, you'll be waiting for a monthly allowance as your living expenses." After laughing, there was some bitterness. A child without parents even had to worry about tuition fees. Fortunately, the little girl was the orphan of a martyr and had no tuition fees for the 3 years of junior high school. Otherwise, Sun Dongqing, the mayor's wife, would probably have to make the little girl quit school and go out to work. It was already past 7:00 in the morning, and there were more and more students in the school. The freshmen who came in for the first year of junior high still looked childish. They laughed and played with each other as they entered the campus. Yi Jian came out of the office and walked around the campus for a while. She didn't go back until the classroom door opened. After not seeing her for a summer break, her classmates seemed to have grown taller. And Jessen pounced on Yi Qian from behind like a tiger pouncing on its prey. She laughed and said, "What kind of food did you eat? You grew so fast." The little girl was getting further and further away from Yi Qian. Yi Qian, who had grown up a week ago, had also started the normal process of a girl's development. Over the summer break, she had indeed grown quite quickly. "You want to eat? Don't eat it for breakfast tomorrow. I'll send some over tomorrow. I promise you'll grow taller." Yi Qian turned around and looked at her friend with a smile. After a glance, she laughed even louder. "Did you go to work as a child laborer? You're so tanned. Your face really makes your teeth look so white." And Jessen, who had gone out with her father for the whole summer break, waved her hand and said boldly, "My father said that it's better to travel 10,000 miles than to read 10,000 books. I followed his expedition team for the whole summer break and was exposed to the elements. How can I not be tanned?" And Jessen's father was a geologist. Not long after, Zhang Na, Zhang Bin, and the other students who had a good relationship with Yi Qian entered the classroom. Zhou Liao, who was a math enthusiast, was also added in. The few of them sat together to discuss Yi Qian's Olympiad questions. Lagrange's mean value theorem and Cauchy's mean value theorem. These are things that can only be learned in advanced mathematics. This written exam also covers them. Not only that, there's also a higher-order derivative formula. Leibniz also has it. It can be said that the mathematical Olympiad is not just a middle school level. The difficulty of the questions is quite wide. Yi Qian's expression was a little serious. She had seen a lot and knew why Director Li said that there was still a big gap between their country's theoretical knowledge and the international knowledge. The foreign students may not know how to do it, but they have all understood it. As for our own students. Looking at the shocked faces in front of him, Yi Qian sighed and said, "So, there is still a gap between us and them. Oh my God, this is too difficult. I've never even heard of it. TSK, 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 no wonder he was eliminated in the exam." Luckily, he was eliminated. Otherwise, he would be a disgrace abroad. And Jessin was very emotional. Although her math results were not bad, it was only middle school math. As for high school, advanced. Sorry, she did not understand any of it. Zhou Liao pushed up his glasses and sighed heavily. That's what I thought too. Fortunately, I was selected. It's fine if I lose face in my own school, but if I really lose face abroad, I'll be a sinner. Chapter 219. Go, go, go. You want to be a sinner of the country. You don't have the ability to make the whole country remember your crimes. Zhang Na rolled her eyes and put her chin on the table dejectedly. She said sullenly, "I'm not good at math. What will I do when I get into high school?" "Yi Qian, you're going to take the provincial high school entrance exam." "I'm afraid I can't even afford to take the city's high school entrance exam." There was only 1 year left until the general entrance exam. Although everyone was smiling, the students with good grades were actually feeling a certain amount of pressure. Yi Qian flicked her forehead with his finger and smiled. "You're worrying too much. There's only 1 year left until the general entrance exam. Work hard and get into high school first. Then work hard for the next 3 years and get into university." Easy for you to say. It's easy to get into high school, but getting into university is difficult. While Jessin was wailing, Ms. Ko and Ying walked into the classroom together. Someone said, "Ms. Ko is here." The noisy classroom quieted down instantly as the students sat at the nearest table. Although Yi Ying's eyes were a little swollen, her complexion was still good. She glanced coldly at Yi Qian's seat and saw a boy in the class. She gritted her teeth and didn't look again. She walked to the seat below the podium and sat down with her back straight. There was no formal class. Ms. Ko started with a bunch of rules and regulations, just like in previous years. When it came to the students who didn't take the exam last semester, she habitually said sternly, "Yi Qian, stand up." Before she could react, she had already called out his name. Yi Qian also stood up quickly. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes. This slip of the tongue. He probably talked about her a lot. "You did well this time. Sit down." Ms. Ko didn't expect to be called out like this. Her expression was stiff and she was quite unhappy. However, she had no choice but to praise Yi Qian vaguely. And Jessin snickered secretly. Being a teacher like Teacher Ku, it was amazing. Teacher Ku, who already knew that Yi Qian had won the grand prize in the mathematical Olympiad, didn't want to mention it at all. It was as if she could cover up the truth by not mentioning it. Fortunately, Yi Qian did not care about these things. He allowed Teacher Ku to loudly praise and commend Ying from the podium. He even called on the entire class to learn from her, to have a proper attitude, and to not cause trouble for the teacher all day long. Sun Dongqing had deliberately chosen to come during school hours. She was about to rush into the classroom when she heard Teacher Ku praising her daughter. She shrank back and waited outside. Principal Chen, who came with Secretary Wu, immediately recognized that the woman standing outside the classroom was the new mayor's wife. His eyes narrowed, and a trace of coldness flashed through his sharp eyes. This is Class 1. In front of us is Class 2. There's no distinction between experimental classes and ordinary classes in the middle school in town. As he spoke, he intentionally guided Secretary Wu into Class 1. Although Fujian Town was only a town middle school and its teachers were slightly weaker than the ones in the city, there was a military unit here. The children of the military's family members were also studying here. Therefore, the teachers here were quite capable. Secretary Wu laughed. You're too humble. Many of the top students in our city graduated from your school. This year, 4 students from number 1 middle school were admitted to Tsinghua University. One of them graduated from Fujian Town Middle School. This time, it seemed that there were 2 more capable students who could get into Tsinghua University and West University. One was Yi Qian, and the other was Gao Yang from Class 3. Chapter 220. Secretary Wu and the others were not the only ones who thought so. Yi Zhifan, who came back with them, also thought so. During the days when he was studying in the city, he lived in fear and trepidation. The municipal director told him in private that he was not supposed to be the mayor. He did not know why, but the day before the letter was released, the municipal committee suddenly appointed him as the mayor of Fujian Town. He said that someone wanted to make him the mayor. After the meeting, the municipal committee's secretary asked him to stay behind to show his concern. Before he left, he patted him on the shoulder and said meaningfully, Xiao Yi, you are still young. You are already the mayor of a town at 35 years old. Work hard and you will have a bright future. It sounded mysterious, but it made his heart skip a beat. This was because he remembered the phone call from a few years ago in the middle of the night. For the past few days, he had been thinking about who was secretly helping him, so he forgot about Yi Qian going abroad to win an award. Who would have thought that he would be shocked by the sudden news yesterday morning? His mind was still in a daze. Yi Qian. She actually persuaded the famous Chinese Mr. Gao Qiliang to set up a scholarship for outstanding students charity program in the province. She won an award and helped solve a big problem in the province. Yi Zhifan rushed back to town with Secretary Wu. He did not see Sun Dongqing at home. He asked downstairs and found out that she had gone to school. His heart skipped a beat and he sped to school on his motorcycle. Unfortunately, he was still a little late. In front of Principal Chen and Secretary Wu, Sun Dongqing complained bitterly about Yi Qian. I am worried. I am so worried that my hair is turning white. I didn't go home for the whole summer vacation. No one knows where I went. He clearly saw me on the street yesterday, but he didn't even greet me. This child, Teacher Ku, Principal Chen, I really can't control him anymore. In the classroom, Yi Ying, whose face was pale, looked at her mother scolding Yi Qian in front of the whole class. She said anxiously and angrily, Mom, stop it. Stop it. He wanted to drag her out, but Principal Chen's sharp gaze stopped him in his tracks. Yi Ying, who couldn't move even half a step, was so anxious that she sat in her seat with tears in her eyes. She watched her mother make a fool of herself, and also, she made a fool of herself. Sun Dongqing wasn't stupid, but she had a very fatal flaw. She didn't want to verify anything, and only wanted to feel comfortable in her heart. In the past, she had been more cautious. However, as Yi Zhifan's position in the government increased, she became more and more unbridled. Who in this town could be more important than her husband? No. Since there wasn't, then everyone in the town had to follow the mayor's orders. Naturally, they had to listen to her, the mayor's wife. If she said that Yi Qian wasn't good, then everyone had to say that Yi Qian wasn't good. You're too worried. I wouldn't be this tired even if I taught 10 children. My Ying has never made me worry much since she was young. It's just her. My white hair is all because of her. Her parents died early, so I have to take care of her. However, I can't control her. I really can't control her. She left early, didn't go to school, fell in love, and was whispering sweet nothings to a boy named Gao Yang on the street yesterday. This time, I didn't misunderstand. Yesterday, I saw the two of them side by side. They even shared a popsicle. Teacher Ku, you're a teacher. You have to control them. You have to. Chapter 221. Sun Dongxing's behavior had aroused the disgust of the rebellious students from the moment she barged into the classroom and appeared in a high and mighty manner. When they heard her talk about Yi Jian's achievements, she didn't forget to praise Yi Ying as if she was a goddess who had descended to the mortal world. This made more and more students dislike her. Now, she even dared to talk nonsense about Yi Qian and Gao Yang as a couple. It was as if someone had poked a hornet's nest. The entire class was filled with shouts of anger. Zhang Bin was the first to speak. He shouted, "Auntie, you've got the wrong person. Yi Ying and Gao Yang are in a relationship. It has nothing to do with Yi Qian. You're too good at making things up. You're confusing right and wrong. Auntie, you've given us an interesting lesson. Yi Ying, your mother is so amazing. She has a glib tongue. She even scared our principal and teachers so much that they don't dare to interrupt your mother." Their mocking and disdainful gazes made Yi Ying, who was so embarrassed that she wanted to disappear, burst into tears. She lay on the table and didn't dare to raise her head. Sun Dongxing couldn't stand her precious daughters crying. She felt that the entire class was bullying Yi Ying. She slammed the table and pointed at the boy who spoke first. She said angrily, "What's your name? Who are your parents? Do you have any manners? Don't interrupt when adults are talking." She then said to Yi Ying, "Ying, what are you afraid of? Tell Mom, which of your classmates bullied you? Tell them all." Her reaction made Secretary Wu, who had remained silent, shake his head in secret. Mayor Yi was a capable person. It was a pity that he had such an insensible wife. What a pity, what a pity. Zhang Bin stood up when his name was mentioned. He wasn't afraid of angering her. He said happily, "Auntie, I'm Zhang Bin. My dad went to the city and my mom went to a meeting. If you want to find them, you'll probably have to wait until the day after tomorrow." Principal Chen knew him. He had a father who was a policeman and had a strong sense of justice. Principal Chen, who had remained silent the entire time, finally spoke up. "Parent, after hearing what you said, I also want to know if Yi Qian is as you say. How about this? Can I trouble you to sit in the classroom for a while? I need to make some arrangements first." She then turned to Teacher Ku and said, "Teacher Ku, you're the form teacher, and the podium is also where the teacher stands. Please ask this parent to go down and sit down." Miss Ku looked like she was about to faint. She regretted not stopping Sun Dongxing from entering the classroom. She had hoped that Sun Dongxing would stand up for her. Now, she had to clean up the mess. Hearing this, she shuddered and hurriedly said to the furious Sun Dongxing, "Madam Mayor, you can leave first. Isn't Ying crying? Sit down beside her and comfort her. Principal Chen needs to arrange something." Teacher Ku, who vaguely felt that the situation was not very good, was afraid that she would not cooperate, so she quietly pulled her. "Does he care about this or not? Is there anything wrong with what I said? A mere principal dares to put on airs in front of me. I want to see what he has arranged. If I'm not satisfied, I'll go to the city and ask the leaders to remove him from his position. For more than 10 days, she had heard too many flattering words. Sun Dongqing did not think of herself as the mayor's wife, but as the governor's wife. Perhaps even the governor's wife was not as arrogant as her. Principal Chen, who pretended not to hear her, smiled slightly and said to Zhang Bin, who had not yet sat down, "Go and find a few PE teachers to bring the TV and video camera in the meeting room into the classroom." Chapter 222. Zhang Bin was a member of the sports committee, so he was familiar with all the teachers. Hearing this, he, who was still in the middle of puberty, let out a hoarse "ah" and jogged out of the classroom. "How about I go to your office and sit for a while?" Seeing this, Secretary Wu whispered, "The mayor's wife has a bad temper. I'm afraid you'll have to put in some effort." Principal Chen smiled and said, "Secretary Wu, you don't have to leave. Just treat it as attending an open class. Last time she just made a scene, and now she's starting again. The mayor's wife is not only bad-tempered, she's asking for a beating. Does she think that the teachers and students are afraid of her?" Ha! Unfortunately, Chen Dongfeng isn't afraid. This matter also involved another student, Gao Yang. He then instructed the student sitting next to him, "Go to the third-year class 1 and ask Gao Yang to come over. If the teacher asks, tell him that I'm looking for him. Oh, right, tell him to go to my office and get the videotape on the table." After everything was arranged, Principal Chin gave Yi Qian a calm down look and asked Secretary Wu to sit at the back of the classroom. It really was like an open class. Principal Chin asked Fu Dong to go out. I'm guessing he asked Gao Yang to come down. And Justin's face was livid. She gritted her teeth and said to Yi Qian, "Just you wait. With how much Principal Chin cares about you, he won't let her have it easy." Zhou Liao, who usually didn't care much about class matters, also had a heavy expression. He whispered to Yi Qian, "Like mother, like daughter. Yi Qian, it's a miracle that you're still alive. Ha, just you wait. There's going to be a good show." Zhang Na sneered. She glanced at Yi Ying, who was sitting on pins and needles. Her heart was laughing even harder. She also didn't like Yi Ying. Yi Qian knew that Principal Chin wouldn't give up so easily this time. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He didn't expect Sun Dongqing to be so arrogant. How could Yi Zhifan, who had a mind of his own, tolerate her ignorance and arrogance? When she heard them talking behind her and feeling indignant for her, she said disapprovingly, "This is nothing compared to what happened in the past. You guys can also learn something from her. Did you vomit? Imitate her. Am I tired of living? Don't disgust us. I'd rather learn from Liao Jian's father than her." Yi Qian, whose expression remained indifferent despite the profanities, smiled faintly and said, "Learn from her how to be a person who doesn't make others hate you. Learn from her how not to be a person who doesn't want to live a long life. This is what she taught you." And Jesin turned her head and quickly glanced at Yi Qian. She sighed and said, "Classmate Yi, your psychological endurance is really extraordinary. I really admire you. Even the Buddha would be so angry that he would jump up and down after hearing such words, but you are still able to sit still. You even know how to remind us how to be a person who doesn't make others hate us. Student Yi, if I want to study medicine in the future, the first subject of my research will definitely be you. Why is your brain structure so different from ours?" The more she didn't care, the more impatient Sun Dongqing was on stage. If this continued, the one who would be at a disadvantage would definitely be Sun Dongqing. Yi Qian, who understood, smiled but didn't say anything. When she saw Gao Yang walk into the classroom with a videotape in his hand, the smile on her delicate lips deepened. TSK. No matter how smart Ying was, having an arrogant mother was a tragedy. Chapter 223. Ying was almost out of breath from crying. At this moment, she finally understood why her father reminded her to keep an eye on her mother. She didn't come to school to stand up for her. She was clearly here to make a fool of herself. Listening to the students' mockery, Principal Chen glanced at Ying, who hadn't stood up to speak to protect herself. It would be a lie to say that he didn't feel sorry for her. She was also a smart child, but she had raised such a selfish and narrow-minded person. However, with such a mother, it wasn't strange. Principal Chen, who was determined to dampen Sun Dongqing's spirit, signaled for the students to be quiet. He then asked Gao Yang in a deep voice, "Yi Ying's mother said that she saw you and Yi Qian kissing on the streets yesterday. Is that true? Tell me about your relationship with Yi Qian first." Gao Yang, who was unprepared, frowned. He glanced coldly at Sun Dongqing, who had her chin raised. He pursed his lips and said in a deep voice, "I don't know how she saw Yi Qian and I having that kind of relationship. When Yi Qian came back yesterday, I did buy a popsicle for her. As for what happened, it was because I brought back a set of mathematical Olympiad questions from Australia. There was one question that I didn't know how to solve, so I wanted to discuss it with Yi Qian." He had specifically asked his father to find the most difficult set of mathematical Olympiad questions so that he could have more topics to talk about with Yi Qian. He wanted to clear up all the misunderstandings so that she wouldn't have any prejudice against him. But before the plan could even begin, there was already news of him kissing Yi Qian. Sun Dongqing didn't even bother to comfort her daughter. "Good boy, he's still so stubborn." She aggressively questioned, "You're so dishonest. I saw it with my own eyes, and you're still trying to deny it. What mathematical Olympiad questions from Australia? You're just a wretched girl. You can't even get into the grade. How can you do Australian questions? Tui. That's clearly an excuse." She pointed her spear at Yi Qian, who didn't respond at all. She shouted, "Yi Qian, stand up and explain yourself. Don't make me clean up your mess all day long. Damn girl, you've been fooling around every day and didn't come back for the whole summer vacation. Could it be that you went out with this guy?" Being unreasonable was also one of her abilities. Yi Qian looked at Sun Dongqing, who was still oblivious to the fact that she had stirred up public outrage. His eyes were full of smiles. If that was the case, it wouldn't matter if he said a few words now. Auntie has always liked to think too much. Even if I said I didn't, you wouldn't believe me. You love to pour basin after basin of dirty water on me. What can I explain? My explanation is that I don't understand what you're talking about." Why didn't she see that Sun Dongqing was so stupid in her previous life? Things had already come to this point. Did she really think that Yi Qian would be the one making a fool of herself? What do you mean you don't understand? Just admit that you're in a relationship with this guy. You didn't go home for the entire summer vacation and fooled around everywhere. In Sun Dongqing's eyes, Yi Qian would never be able to escape from her grasp. Moreover, she was now the mayor's wife. Who would dare to offend her for the sake of a wretched girl without parents? In town, there were indeed people who wouldn't stand up for Yi Qian. However, in school, the first person who wasn't afraid of her was Principal Chen, and the second was Gao Yang. Before Yi Qian could speak, Gao Yang's eyes were filled with obvious disgust. He coldly said, "Auntie, yesterday you said behind Yi Qian's back that she didn't go home for the entire summer vacation. You said that she didn't come home every night. You also said that she's a girl who plays truant, doesn't make progress, lies, and is dishonest. May I ask how honest you are?" Chapter 224. She spread unfavorable rumors about Yi Qian everywhere. Didn't she know that rumors were the most fragile? She targeted Yi Qian so much. No wonder Yi Qian hated him in the past. He used to be just like Yi Ying's mother. Guilt gnawed at Gao Yang's heart like a giant ant. He suppressed his anger and said forcefully, "Moreover, Yi Qian didn't live with you. How do you know that she didn't come home every night? Lying. Dishonest. Auntie, are you sure you're talking about Yi Qian and not Yi Ying? Yi Ying, stand up and say it yourself. Who's the dishonest one? When we went to the capital, how did you frame Yi Qian? And how did you frame Yi Qian? Do you dare to say it in front of the whole class?" Just then, a few PE teachers came in with televisions and video recorders. When they heard his words, they all stood at the door of the classroom. What happened? They looked to the back of the classroom to ask for instructions from Principal Chin. Principal Chin waved his hand to indicate that they were busy and let Gao Yang continue the confrontation. Yi Ying, who was lying on the desk, wished that she could faint. Hearing Gao Yang's continuous questioning, her heart was pounding. Panic hit her brain like a tidal wave. How could she stop it? Yi Ying, who was so flustered that she couldn't think at all. No, she had to think of something. She had to think of something. Sun Dongqing, who had always picked up soft persimmons, was shocked by Gao Yang's imposing manner. She heard her eyelids twitching. She secretly pulled the corner of Yi Ying's clothes and asked in a low voice, "Aren't you going to say something? Do you still want to live in class?" "Mom, if I can't live in class, it'll be all because of you." Yi Ying didn't have time to cry. As she spoke, she gritted her teeth. Her mind was spinning fast. She had to think of a way to get out of this quagmire as soon as possible. Hearing this, Sun Dongqing was so angry that she almost fainted. "Ying, can't you see that Mom is here to help you vent your anger?" She lowered her voice and said sternly, "Why are you so weak? Let others ride on your neck. I'm here to support you. What are you afraid of? Who told you to come here?" Yi Ying lost her composure. She raised her head and glared fiercely at her mother. "Don't you know that you're just causing trouble by coming here?" His usual cheerful and kind face was nowhere to be seen. His face was gloomy and cold, and even his facial features revealed a hint of ruthlessness. The students sitting around her, especially the students on her right, were frightened by the ferocity on her face. They turned their necks and stared at the podium, not daring to look at her. Yi Ying was so terrifying. And Jiasin was listening with great interest. Suddenly, she saw Yi Ying raise her head. She seemed to have thought of something and stood up. "Yi Ying, don't you have heart disease? You have to hold on. Otherwise, if you have a heart attack, you'll be in big trouble. But you don't look like you're sick. Why don't you explain what happened in the suburbs of the capital? Are you trying to frame Yi Qian again?" "Ha, if you really did it, I wouldn't be surprised. This is the real Yi Ying." The children were arguing, but Secretary Wu's focus was not on this. He was concerned about another issue. Heart disease. Mayor Ye's daughter had heart disease. Secretary Wu's eyes narrowed. Having a heart disease was not a good thing. The school had to bear a great risk. He leaned to the side and asked Principal Chin, "Is it confirmed?" Chapter 225. According to Mayor Yi, it should have been confirmed. You know that the school won't ask the parents to prove anything for this kind of thing. Principal Chin said casually. From his tone, one could tell that he didn't really believe that Yi Ying had heart disease. Could it be that this kind of thing was faked? What good could it do? Secretary Wu, who was shocked, looked thoughtfully at the mayor's wife who only knew how to protect her own child while trampling on other students. His gaze flickered slightly before he looked away. It seemed that he had to remind number 1 middle school that regardless of whether Mayor Ye's daughter had heart disease, it would be better for her to study at another school. If she didn't study in the city, that would be even better. No school would accept such a troublesome parent. Moreover, if she really did have heart disease and something went wrong, the entire school would be so disturbed that classes couldn't be held normally. At this moment, Sun Dongxing had never thought that she would almost ruin Yi Ying's future with her actions. When Yi Ying, who wanted to pretend that she had a heart attack, saw that her plan was blocked, her shoulders trembled even harder. She replied, "You can ask Yi Qian yourself. Why are you forcing me?" She lowered her head and didn't say anything else. She bit her lower lip until it was bleeding. She didn't dare to face Gao Yang's questioning, nor did she dare to quarrel with Enjussin. Yi Qian looked up slightly and glanced at her. He said to Enjussin, "Miss, you're more agitated than I am. Sit down. We've already dealt with the past. This isn't the main point now." At this point, was there still a need to harp on the past trivial matters? No, there was no need at all. Making a scene like this would not only embarrass Yi Ying, but also embarrass Sun Dongxing. Of course, it would also embarrass Yi Zhifan. If that was the case, why did she have to add insult to injury? Gao Yang wasn't a man who would force Yi Ying. He didn't force Yi Ying to answer. Instead, he looked at Sun Dongxing. "Auntie, why don't you go back and ask Yi Ying what happened when we went to the capital to study?" Went to the capital school. What else could they do when they went to the capital to study? Wasn't it just studying? The problem was, Yi Qian, that wretched girl, was also there. Why didn't Ying Ying mention it? Sun Dongxing only knew that her daughter had excellent grades and was going to the capital to study and participate in the competition. Other than that, she didn't know anything else. She also didn't know that Yi Qian was also going. This was because Yi Ying had never told her parents that Yi Qian was better than her and had even been selected to compete overseas. How could Sun Dongxing not understand her daughter? After being interrogated by Gao Yang, she quickly understood that her daughter had concealed the fact that Yi Qian had gone to the capital to study. From the looks of it, it would not make sense for him to say that the wretched girl did not return home during the summer vacation and fooled around outside. Fine, since he couldn't win this argument, he would talk about something else. And this kid from the Gao family is also a playboy. He was clearly with Ying Ying, but in the blink of an eye, he was seduced by that wretched girl. Little brats, if this old lady wants to take care of one, it's the same as taking care of two. Today, she won't let this pair go. Sun Dongxing, whose expression was cloudy, slammed her hand on the desk and accused him, "Principal Chin, look at how the school teaches the students. Each and every one of them has no respect for their elders. How can I be at ease sending my Ying Ying to the school if all of you are like this? Teacher Ku, you are a teacher, you know best what kind of person Yi Qian is. I'm not lying." Chapter 226. Besides, if the adults find out that the two of them are in a relationship, they won't admit it. I don't care, as long as it doesn't affect my Ying Ying. Now it was up to Teacher Ku to deal with it. Sun Dongxing's mouth felt dry. If Yi Ying wasn't still crying, she would have gone downstairs to buy a bottle of water and watch how the wretched girl would embarrass herself in class. Her words made Teacher Ku's body sway slightly. She was about to be killed by the mayor's wife. Gao Yang thought that even the stupidest person would know that they were wrong after what he said. Who would have thought that she was still twisting words and forcing logic, trying to pin the groundless accusation on Yi Jian? He, who had always been calm, suddenly felt that his internal organs were burning with anger. Madam Mayor, who is the one who got one of the gold medals that only 6 middle school students in the world can get? Gao Yang, who didn't waste his breath, slammed the table and shouted angrily. Sun Dongqing was indeed a genius to be able to force a person who always had a cold expression to show his emotions. Gao Yang, who had never lost his temper, suddenly shouted. In addition, Gao Yang also had such a strong aura. Sun Dongqing was so scared that she jumped up and her heart trembled. You, who are you challenging? Don't you have any manners? Principal Chen stood up when he saw that she was about to start throwing a tantrum again. He said in a dignified voice, "Now you can all be quiet. Zhang San is right. Li Si is also right. Let's see who is right. Madam Mayor, you are an adult. Don't be so calculative with a child." Sun Dongqing was indeed shocked. What did Yi Qian, that wretched girl, get? What gold medal did only 6 middle school students in the world get? Why did it sound like it was very impressive? Ying, say something to Mom. What's going on? I'm going to die because of you, Mom. I'm going to die because of you. Ying, who was about to break down, was as pale as snow. Of course, she knew what was going on. Because she knew, she didn't want too many people to know that Yi Qian went abroad to get a gold medal. How was she inferior to Yi Qian? In the past, she had always been superior to Yi Qian. But now, she was inferior to Yi Qian in every way. How could she accept this? How could she admit defeat? But the more it was like this, the more she couldn't get the results she wanted. Gold medal. Yi Qian had won the gold medal, but she had nothing. Even Gao Yang, who used to stand by her side, no longer helped her. Everything had changed. Everything was different. She hated this wretched girl to death. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Her daughter was crying non-stop, which made Sun Dongqing anxious like an ant on a hot pan. What if she cried her eyes out? Yi Qian, that wretched girl, how could she act like an older sister? He had clearly told her to help her younger sister in school. Look, she only knew how to gang up with her classmates to bully Ying. The more she thought about it, the angrier Sun Dongqing became. Her expression darkened. She turned around and pointed at Yi Qian. Stupid girl, can't you see how sad your sister is? How could she act like an elder sister? Get over here and admit your mistake. Quick! That wretched girl was becoming more and more disobedient. When old Yi came back, she would have a good talk with him. As an uncle, disciplining his niece was a matter of course. Chapter 227. This time, even Secretary Wu was flabbergasted. How could there be such a woman? This. How could Mayor Yi like someone like her? He even married her as his wife. Wouldn't he be harming his career? Yi Qian almost laughed out loud. Auntie, are you smart or stupid? Do you think this school is your home? Do you think you can show off however you want? She didn't even need to say anything, and the entire class was already on her side. Tan Wei, Xia Xifeng, and the others who were close friends with Yi Ying were also dumbfounded. They couldn't accept how Auntie's son, who was usually so nice to them, became like this. Xia Xifeng wanted to stand up and say something, but she didn't dare to do so now. She was also afraid of being despised by the entire class. Auntie, how can you be so shameless? You're too shameless. Who do you think Yi Qian is? A slave. Auntie, you're Yi Ying's stepmother, right? Yeah, only a stepmother would do something like this. If she was Yi Ying's biological mother, she wouldn't cause a scene in school. This was an embarrassing thing. When Yi Zhifan rushed in, his wife became the target of public criticism. When the students saw that the teacher didn't stop them, they all spoke up for Yi Qian. Even so, they didn't target Yi Ying. At this point, Yi Qian felt that it was only right for her to stand up and say something back. She just stood up and raised her hand slightly. The students who were speaking up instantly quieted down. From this point, it was enough to see that Yi Qian had a certain level of influence in the class. At least, the students all respected her. Then, she slowly smiled and said, "Auntie, I still have some self-respect. You scolded me, hit me, humiliated me, wronged me, and spread rumors to slander me. It's already like this. Don't tell me I still have to treat Ying as my own sister and respect you as an elder. You should just be the mayor's wife. As for me, I'm sorry, I don't have an auntie like you or a sister like Ying." After saying that, she sat down. Secretary Wu nodded in secret. She was natural and generous. Her every move was open and aboveboard. There was no trace of despicable behavior. Her character could be seen at a glance. He said to Principal Chin, "She is indeed a good student. She has a strong tolerance. It's a pity that she has such an auntie. Adversity makes people grow. Yi Qian, this girl has her own principles. Listen, this isn't over." Principal Chin purposely didn't. If he didn't come, she, as a teacher, would have to go to the hospital. She picked up the blackboard brush and slammed it on the podium a few times. Using her authority as a teacher, she made the students who had been chattering the moment Yi Jian sat down quiet down. She said sternly, "Quiet down. Everyone quiet down. If anyone dares to speak again, go outside and memorize for an hour." After the classroom quieted down, Teacher Cook said to Principal Chin, who didn't stand up to preside over the situation, "Principal, Mayor Yi is here. What do you think? Then let's invite the mayor into the classroom." Since the mayor was here, he naturally couldn't leave. Principal Chin was quite willing to invite the mayor into the classroom. He then ordered Gao Yang, who didn't leave and had a cold expression, "Student Gao, put the tape away. Let's invite Mayor Yi to watch it together." Chapter 228. Did Yi Jian go out to fool around like the mayor's wife said, or what happened? It's all in this videotape. Students, you are all a group of students who want to find out the truth. Now, let's applaud and invite Mayor Yi into the classroom to find out what the truth is with us. Applause? What kind of applause is this? This is a slap in the face. The number of people who clapped was equal to the number of people who were slapping their own faces. Yi Jifan, who had never been so embarrassed, still had to pretend that he didn't know anything. He had to shamelessly say, "Thank you," before going to the back of the classroom and sitting next to Secretary Wu. After sitting down, he heard Secretary Wu say meaningfully, "Mayor Yi, your wife is a master. I admire her, I admire her." Compared to the children's undisguised contempt, the real masters, like Secretary Wu, made Yi Jifan suffer unspeakably. He took the initiative to shake hands with Secretary Wu and said with a bitter smile, "Sorry to make you laugh. Sigh, I also have a headache." Then he shook hands with Principal Chen and apologized repeatedly, "I'm really sorry. My wife has caused trouble for the school again. It's not the first time. I'm used to it. Mayor Yi, please sit down." Principal Chen smiled. His words also made Yi Jifan so embarrassed that he couldn't even maintain the calm expression on his face. When Sun Dongqing saw her husband come in, she was very happy at first. She thought that he came to support the mother and daughter. However, she threw a few glances at her husband, but he didn't look at her. While muttering in her heart, she faintly felt a little scared. "I didn't cause any trouble this time. I came to the school because I saw with my own eyes that the wretched girl was in a relationship." The classroom quieted down and no one spoke anymore. As the video played, the first scene that appeared was the blue sky and white clouds of Australia. A plane flew over and the scenery of the University of Sydney was shown. About a minute later, the camera began to turn to a bus that drove into the campus. Students got off the bus one by one. Under the guidance of the teacher, the students, who only had a pencil box in their hands, neatly walked into a spacious and bright classroom in an orderly manner. The camera fell on a horizontal curtain with the words Mathematical Olympiad written in English, and the Chinese translation also appeared on the screen. Throughout the entire process, no one explained anything, nor was there an announcer. The camera was only focused on the Chinese student, and Yi Qian's figure appeared the most in close-up shots. This is our first day participating in the Mathematical Olympiad. The time limit is 5 hours, but Yi Qian only used less than 4 hours to solve all the questions and get the highest score for the day. He also got the highest score for the team. Gao Yangyi became the live commentator. The boy's slightly hoarse voice spoke slowly. There wasn't much emotion in his introduction, but it made the students inexplicably excited. It was unknown when the applause started. Especially when the accompaniment of the national anthem played on the television, the applause was even louder. Even if the palms of his hands were red and in pain, he did not stop. Damn, Yi Qian, you're too awesome. That's awesome. Look at that Vietnamese guy. Damn, he's about to cry. He can't beat our Yi Qian, so he's crying. Isn't that embarrassing? The video was already showing the third day of the oral calculation competition. Yi Qian stood alone in front of the examination table, calmly and quickly explaining the process of solving the questions and the answers. At the same time, the contestants from various countries were so nervous that they were wiping their sweat because of the speed at which he answered the questions. At the end of the competition, Yi Qian and another boy almost took the lead. They fought fiercely for the questions, and their accuracy reached 100%. Chapter 229. When one of the students made a mistake while answering the question, Yi Qian immediately took over and accurately matched the student's answer to the question. When she finally answered the correct answer, the entire class heard applause from the television. Good. Very good. Endless praises were heard. At this point, the screen froze Yi Qian. Everyone saw that compared to the other students who were sweating profusely, Yi Qian did not even have a single drop of sweat on the tip of her nose. She maintained absolute calmness throughout the entire process. She was calm all the way to the end. That kind of calmness, that kind of confidence, that kind of confidence, that kind of confidence, that kind of confidence, that kind of confidence. From her eyes, from her demeanor, you could tell that she was definitely not the Yi Qian sitting in the classroom right now. It was as if she was a completely different person. Especially when she spoke fluent English. Her classmates had never heard her speak it before. Who knew that she could speak English? No one knew. All the students stared nervously at the television. Even though the competition had already ended, they could still feel how nervous they were through the television. Every one of them secretly clenched their fists, waiting for the final result. Sun Dongqing was already dumbfounded. The one who spoke a foreign language was Yi Qian, that wretched girl. She even went overseas to compete. Why did it feel like it wasn't real? How could she not know what that wretched girl was capable of? Ying, this must be fake. She raised her head suspiciously and gently nudged Ying, who was no longer crying. Why does it feel like it's fake? If there's a winner, you should be the one standing at the top. Ying did not reply. She was completely dumbfounded as she kept muttering, how could it be, how could it be, how could she? No, it's impossible, it's definitely impossible. Something was wrong with her. It was as if she was having a nightmare. The television finally reached the end. When the Chinese team was announced as the winner, thunderous applause rang out. Sun Dongqing, who had called out Ying several times but did not get a response, was so scared that her hands and feet went cold. She stood up and shouted at the back, Jifan, come and see your daughter. Something happened, something big happened. She only had this one seedling, so nothing could happen to her. Yi Ying was not a person who was easily defeated. After being yelled at by her mother, she quivered and came back to her senses. She stared intently at the television until the end of the broadcast. She saw all the Chinese students hugging Yi Qian, saw the smiles on their faces. Those smiles pierced her eyes deeply. The applause was much louder than Sun Dongqing's. Her roar only woke Yi Ying up from her stupor. Mom, I'm fine. Don't say any more. Yi Ying's face was cold as she clapped along numbly. Go back with Dad and see if you can find a way to transfer me to another school. I can't stay in this school anymore. Sun Dongqing, who was scared out of her wits, finally heard her daughter speak normally. However, after hearing her daughter speak, she frowned. What are you talking about? Transfer to another school? Where? Read it here. It's all fake, yet you believe it. Do you think I don't know how capable that wretched girl is? She did not know how many cold glares Yi Jifan had given her in the dark. She was a woman who could not do anything but spoiled everything. She refused to listen to him when he told her to stop. This time, she even came to the school. He did not know what she had done. After the recording ended, Gao Yang turned off the power and said in a low voice, "This is why Yi Qian was not in town for the entire summer break. She went to study." After passing the municipal, provincial, and national exams, she went to Sydney, Australia. Chapter 230. Madam Mayor, your slander of Yi Qian is baseless. I don't know why you can speak ill of Yi Qian so confidently. Is it because you are the mayor's wife? Do you think you can do whatever you want in town and accuse whoever you want? His words were like a slap to Yi Jifan's face, making the dignified mayor of a town blush in front of a group of students. Sun Dongqing was relying on her husband's presence. Now that she was being slapped in the face by a middle school student, she frowned and shouted, "Jackals of the same tribe, this kind of thing is obviously fake. Do you think I don't know Yi Qian's capabilities? Speaking in a foreign language, it's obviously fake." She then glared at Yi Qian, who did not take the initiative to speak. Do you even act like an older sister? Why do you have to fight with your own sister for everything? Oh, my God. Auntie, Yi Ying doesn't have the ability to fight with Yi Qian for this kind of thing. Does she know how to do the questions on the paper? If she knew how to do it, she wouldn't have been eliminated during the national competition. A tree needs a piece of bark, a person needs a face. Auntie Sun, where did you lose your face? Do you have to be so shameless? Luckily my family moved to the city this year. Otherwise, when I think about how I have to go back to a town with a mayor's wife like this, I feel embarrassed just walking out. More and more students couldn't stand Sun Dongqing's outrageous behavior. The rebellious teenagers didn't think as much as adults. They were worried about offending the mayor's family and making life difficult for their families. They couldn't stand it, so naturally, they had to say it out loud. The sounds of mockery numbed Yi Ying's expression. She had a mother who did not know what was good for her. Was her life ruined? Right now, it was only the whole class laughing at her. Before noon, it would be the whole school. By tomorrow morning, it would be the whole town. And Yi Qian. She clearly had the chance to stand up and explain, the chance to stop all this, but she did not. She deliberately made a fool of herself to force her, Yi Ying, to leave the school. Yi Qian. Even if I leave school, you won't have it easy either. I swear that I won't let you have an easy time in this lifetime. With her head lowered, Yi Ying's expression was as gloomy as an evil witch's. Her eyes were shrouded in a thick fog that refused to disperse. Her eyes were heavy, deep, and filled with resentment. She did not raise her head to look at Yi Qian. She was afraid that she would not be able to stop herself from rushing forward and tearing Yi Qian's face apart. Well, let me get up and say a few words. Student Gao Yang must be tired after standing for so long. Why don't you sit down and listen? How could Secretary Wu not see the anger on Yi Jifan's face? It was because he was there. After watching and listening for so long, he understood the situation. When it was his turn to say a few words, this matter became Mayor Ye's own family matter. After walking to the podium, he first introduced himself. He deliberately looked at Sun Dongqing, who was sitting down, and said with a smile, about Yi Qian winning the gold medal in the mathematical Olympiad, I can be sure that it is not fake. No one would dare to fake something like this. Mayor Yi, you know this very well. No. It is not fake. Then it is real. That's not right. Didn't Ying say it was impossible just now? Sun Dongqing, who actually understood in her heart, was not willing to choose to believe it. She, no matter what, did not believe that her daughter was inferior to a wretched girl. That wretched girl could not even be raised like this. How could she be satisfied? Chapter 231. She didn't forget to put on a brave front and said harshly, so what if it's true? Our Ying can also participate. It's all because of Yi Qian, that wretched girl, who tricked me and made Ying suffer. Get out. Get out. Before she could finish, Yi Jifan, who couldn't take it anymore, walked over and pointed at the classroom door. His gaze was as if he wanted to eat her alive. How long do you want to embarrass us, father and daughter? Look at yourself. Even a middle school student looks down on you. How dare you stand here and say such things? Yi Ying smiled lightly. Dad, I'm already prepared to transfer schools. After Mom's mess, I can't stay here anymore. I don't agree. If you want to leave, you'll die. Ah! A shrill scream suddenly rang out, and the most shocking thing about this scream was, the mayor actually slapped his wife harshly in front of the students and teachers. The slap was quite heavy. The mayor's wife's face was clearly imprinted with a red handprint. She deserved it. One slap wasn't enough. No wonder he could become the mayor. He endured until now to come out. That's impressive. A new broom sweeps clean. The first one he did was directly on his wife. That's not bad. It wasn't that a 15-year-old child didn't know anything, but it wasn't that they didn't know much either. Therefore, these words that came out of their mouths were even more troublesome. Sun Dongqing, who was slapped, met her husband's murderous gaze. She didn't dare to jump up. She covered her face and shivered. You hit me. Sun Dongqing, look at yourself. You're shameless. Yi Jifan even had the thought of getting a divorce. If he could get a divorce, he would have done so long ago. Such a stupid woman. If he didn't teach her a lesson, he would be dragged down by her. She slapped Sun Dongqing's arrogance and crushed her haughty expression into pieces, but it made the whole class feel very satisfied. It was wrong to hit someone, but when it came to someone who deserved it, the choice was to ignore it. Even Secretary Wu chose to ignore it. He cleared his throat and continued to talk about Yi Qian. Now that we're done talking about the award, let's talk about something else. I believe that after you hear this, you'll be even more grateful to Yi Qian's students. How could they not be grateful? All the students of Fujian Middle School who got into the top 10 of their grade received scholarships. The first place received a 1,000 yuan scholarship, while the rest received a 600 yuan scholarship. The entire classroom was boiling with excitement. No, it should be said that the entire school was boiling with excitement. She had always thought that scholarships were only available in universities. Who would have thought that it was even available in junior high schools? And it was all thanks to Yi Jian from class 2. Not only did the students receive scholarships, the scholarships were also the teachers. Gao Yang, who was still in class 2, naturally knew about it. He knew about it before anyone else. When he saw Yi Jian, who was surrounded by applause, still able to maintain her indifferent smile, a faint smile appeared on his indifferent face. It was as if there was a trace of water on the watermark. Damn, Gao Yang is really handsome when he smiles like that. And Jessen, whose palms were almost numb from clapping, was distracted by the boy's smile. She turned her head and leaned over to Yi Jian. She laughed mischievously. He was especially protective of you just now. Do you think he's interested in you? As she spoke, she laughed even harder. I feel so good thinking about it. Yi Ying is going to vomit blood again. Chapter 232. Yi Qian didn't know if she was angry to the point of vomiting blood, but he was sure that Yi Ying was in a bad mood. Yi Qian smiled and said, "You're thinking too much. As far as I know, Gao Yang will probably go to Australia after he finishes middle school. He won't be coming back in the future. That can't be. His grandmother is still here. Then I don't know." Yi Qian spread his hands, indicating that his knowledge was limited. All she knew was that Gao Yang went to Australia after he graduated from middle school. This was what her father, who came to pick her up, told her when she came back to China. He wanted to see if Yi Qian could persuade Gao Yang. Since it was a family matter, she naturally wouldn't interfere. She immediately rejected it, but she knew that a person like her father wouldn't change his mind easily once he decided on something. Also, Gao Yang was supposed to take the general examination this year, but he didn't take it. Instead, he stayed in school for another year. Who knew what he was thinking? The Provincial Education Committee has decided to award Yi Qian the Outstanding Youth League member. He will be awarded the certificate and medal of the Outstanding Youth League member at the Provincial People's Great Hall on October 1st on the stage. Secretary Wu's words were followed by thunderous applause. This meant that Yi Qian would have to go to the provincial capital on October 1st. Secretary Wu, who had finally explained everything, shook hands with Principal Qin, who was walking up the stage. He smiled and said, "Principal Qin, Yi Qian has won glory for the country and the province. Thank you very much for nurturing such an outstanding student. When the time comes, you will have to accompany Yi Qian to the provincial capital." "Thank you, Secretary Wu. I will definitely accompany you." Principal Qin smiled as he led Secretary Wu out of the classroom. After taking 2 steps, he returned to the classroom as if he was worried. He said to Yi Jifan, who hadn't left yet, "Mayor Yi, please let your wife go home first. The school is a school, after all, not Mayor Ye's home." Yi Jifan was still standing there because of Secretary Wu. He immediately sighed and said, "We have to give Yi Qian an explanation for this. My husband has caused trouble for the school today, but my daughter is really fine. She was just implicated by her mother." She then looked coldly at Sun Dongqing, who was being held tightly by her daughter, and said in a deep voice, "Go and apologize to me right now. Apologize to Yi Qian." Yi Jifan had already thought of a countermeasure. He could not implicate his daughter in this matter. Secretary Wu was a member of the Municipal Education Commission. No matter what, he had to protect his daughter first. He lowered his head and gave Ying a look that only the father and daughter could understand. It seemed that they had already discussed something. Sun Dongqing's expression changed drastically. She raised her hand and pointed in the direction of Yi Qian and screamed, "You want me to apologize to this wretched girl? I can't wait to beat her to death. Ying just said that she wanted to transfer schools. She doesn't want to study at this school anymore. Mom, what else do you want? If you continue to make a scene like this, are you trying to force me to my death? Are you trying to force me to my death?" Suddenly, Ying screamed hysterically. Her eyes were red with tears. "Will you only be satisfied after you force me to my death? Am I right?" It was as if she had gone crazy. She rushed out as she spoke, looking as if she was really being forced to commit suicide by her mother. The students didn't react to her sudden rush. Yi Qian glanced at her indifferently, then his cold gaze landed on Yi Jifan's face. Chapter 233. Coincidentally, Yi Jifan was also looking in her direction. When the calm Yi Qian saw this, the corners of his mouth gradually curled up. There was a slight smile in his cold, star-like black eyes. With the dignified mayor here. Sure enough, big problems could always be turned into small ones, and small ones into nothing. It was just a faint smile, but it made Yi Jifan's heart skip a beat. Her smile was too calm and carried a sharpness that could see through everything. In an instant, Yi Jifan knew that his niece had already seen through his secret conversation with Ying. She also knew that Ying was just putting on an act. His niece was not simple. He had underestimated her in the past. With a vicious glint in his eyes, Yi Jifan sneered in his heart. He did not evade and revealed a smile of an elder as he walked towards Yi Qian. "Niece, you see that this matter is getting out of hand. As the elder sister, you should come out and say something." And Jiesin had been watching all this time. When she heard this, she looked at Yi Qian with a worried expression. After returning her a gaze that told her not to worry, Yi Qian stood up and calmly looked at his shrewd uncle. He smiled and said, "This is Mayor Ye's family matter. It has nothing to do with me." Family. The mayor, who did not seem to understand what Yi Qian was talking about, slightly furrowed his brows. Then, he smiled and said, "Yi Qian, you are also my family. What you say is family matter is also your family matter." Since when did he need to step in to deal with a 14 or 15-year-old child? However, this Yi Qian of his was becoming more and more complicated. He had no choice but to step in. Yi Qian also slightly furrowed his brows and looked over with an even more puzzled expression. "Of course, I remember that my family and Mayor Ye's family had separated. In the countryside, after separating, aren't we two families? Since we are two families, then I am definitely not family with Mayor Yi. Look, one of them is your wife and the other is your daughter. What does that have to do with me? Moreover, you're worthy of being an official. You can keep your composure. Your daughter wants to commit suicide, and your wife can't persuade her. Instead, you're making things difficult for an outsider like me. I really admire you." She was so eloquent. No wonder President Ying came back and said that she was bullied again. No wonder, even an adult like Sun Dongqing couldn't deal with her. Yi Jifan, who had a serious look in his eyes, didn't dare to look down on this niece of his who made him feel like a stranger. His face darkened, and he said unhappily, "You can't write two Yi characters with one stroke. You're my niece, and your aunt is your biological aunt. Even if we're separated from the family, we're still related by blood. You're talking too far. Of course, you can't write two Yi characters in one stroke." Everyone with the surname Yi in the world was a family 500 years ago. Unfortunately, my relationship with Mayor Ye's family is estranged. Also, don't tell Mayor Ye's wife that I'm eating your food, living in your house, and using your house. Although I was only 2 or 3 years old when I came to your house, I clearly remember that the town government sent you a sum of money to raise a martyr's orphan. Also, the fields and land were all given to me in advance and handed over to your family for safekeeping. When my mother sacrificed herself, she brought back a piece of glass dragon jade. At that time, the people from the town said that this piece of jade was old jade. The price was shocking. I remember all of this. You can't fool me. Fool. She had already said it out loud and clear, so how could she fool him? Yixifan's heart was in turmoil. Even his breathing quickened. That year, when the people from the government came to give him compensation and the piece of hornless dragon jade from the Qing dynasty, there was no one in the house when they handed it to him. Chapter 234. No, there was someone in the house. It was his niece who didn't know anything and was still a child. You don't have to be surprised. I have a good memory since I was young. I can remember what people say and do since I was 2 years old. So, you can't scare me or trick me. Yi Qian smiled as she admired Yixifan's unpredictable expression. When she saw the deep shock in his eyes, her smile deepened. You can't hide these things even if you want to. I've already told Uncle General I'm just waiting for you to hand it over. She was really going to become a demon. Yixifan calmly sized up this niece of his who was becoming more and more frightening. At home, that stupid woman Sun Dongqing wouldn't talk about anything else, right? If that's the case. Yixifan, who had a murderous intent, pulled the corner of his mouth and sneered. Niece, you're amazing. Don't worry, I'll definitely return what belongs to you. Of course, I won't take what doesn't belong to me. Yi Qian saw the murderous intent hidden deep in his eyes. After being in the army for a long time, she could also feel the murderous intent and murderous intent. Mayor Yi, why aren't you going out to persuade her? If you don't, I'm afraid Ying will really jump off the building. Good, 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 good. Yi Yixifan, had underestimated the enemy. He didn't expect that after scheming for so many years, he would be bitten back by a wolf cub. This was really good. Staring at his unfamiliar niece, Yixifan put on a fake smile and exhorted her, but in reality, there was a hint of threat in his words. Niece, it's not a good thing to be too smart. Those who use their brains too much will not live long. Uncle would like to remind niece that you have to be careful since you are so smart. Thank you for the reminder, but I also have to tell Mayor Yi that there's always someone better than you. There are some people you can't touch or threaten as you wish. As a mayor, you should think twice before you speak in the future. Disaster comes from your mouth. Just as she finished speaking, a powerful voice filled with deterrence sounded. Well said. There's always someone better than you. How could the mayor not be as knowledgeable as a child? The voice shook Yixifan so much that the expression on his face instantly froze. A trace of panic flashed through his eyes, which contained a hint of ferocity, and he hurriedly turned around. He saw Uncle Jen and a military officer in his early 30s with 1 bar and 3 stars standing behind him. Uncle Jen's face was cold and gloomy. He stared at Mayor Yi with his sharp eyes and sneered, I came at the right time. I didn't expect to hear Mayor Yi threatening a child. Hearing this, Yixifan's face no longer had the coldness from before. It was full of respect. Uncle, Grandpa Jen, why are you here? Yi Qian, who was as light as a swallow, lightly walked past Yixifan. Her beautiful eyes were full of smiles as she said, I came yesterday, and you came today. If I had known earlier, I would have come with you. Perhaps this morning's incident wouldn't have happened. The military officer who accompanied her was not happy. He pretended to be angry and said, Girl, do you only have your father in your eyes? Uncle is a living person standing here. Didn't you see him? Of course I didn't see him. Yi Qian's laughter was like a silver bell. Her dark and lively eyes were filled with a bright light. I didn't see you this time. I heard that you were on vacation with your chubby son. Congratulations on becoming a father, Uncle Yu. Also, did you bring my red eggs? Chapter 235. He was a company commander in the army. He had been married for 5 years before he had a chubby son. When Yi Qian mentioned him, he couldn't hide the smile on his stiff face. Silly girl, I won't forget about your red eggs. Didn't I wring them for you? His left hand really was holding 10 or so red eggs, while his right hand was holding a document with the army's serial number. As he spoke, he raised his head and lightly patted her head. Silly girl, you didn't even take your living allowance. Because of you, I couldn't sleep well last night. Early this morning, I bumped into you and wanted to give you your living allowance. Who knew that they would coincidentally overhear a middle-aged man threatening Yi Qian? Everyone in the army treated Yi Qian as their own family. How could they not be angry when their own family member was threatened with not having a long life? Yi Zhifan didn't dare to interrupt. The chaos in his heart wasn't any less than Yi Qian's memories of his childhood. It was even more so. He was so shocked that his palms were sweating. When did she have such a good relationship with the army? No, wait. Ying had mentioned this to him before. She said that Yi Qian was close to the army and even knew a major. At that time, he didn't take it to heart. He thought that they were just friends from running into each other in the village. He definitely didn't expect that they were so close that Yi Qian would call him uncle. Moreover, this wasn't a major that his daughter was referring to, but a captain. Old man Zhen didn't have a smile on his face. He waved at Yi Qian and said sternly, "Come over to Grandpa. Go quickly, old man is sad." Company Commander Yu gently reminded Yi Qian. His tall and cold body directly blocked Yi Zhifan's line of sight. His gaze was cold and ruthless. Under this kind of gaze that was filled with cold metal, even if Yi Zhifan was the mayor of a town, his heart still trembled slightly. The army was the best place to cultivate a man's aura, and Company Commander Yu had participated in all kinds of actual combat exercises, both big and small, in the army. Moreover, he had carried out military operations from the north to the south. His body was covered in blood, and his gaze was extremely intimidating. Seeing that Yi Zhifan had obediently retracted his gaze, Commander Yu withdrew his gaze and stopped staring at Yi Zhifan. She wanted to bully Yi Wanwan. The regiment commander and the political commissar would not agree. Outside, Ying was being held in Sun Dongqing's arms. She was screaming her heart out, but ever since Uncle Zhen appeared, her eyes had never left him. She could even see fear in her father's eyes when he looked at Uncle General. Of course Yi Zhifan was afraid. Back then, why did he become a village cadre? Then, why did he become the mayor step by step? This old man was very clear in his heart. If it weren't for his sister-in-law, Yi Qian's mother, he wouldn't be where he was today. Loyalty, filial piety, etiquette, righteousness, integrity, and shame. Mayor Yi, I think you don't even know how to write these words. Old man Zhen shielded Yi Qian behind him as if he was protecting his own child. This first-rank sergeant who had gone through storms and wars, and survived a hail of bullets and smoke, stood in front of 35-year-old Yi Zhifan. He was like an insurmountable mountain with a majestic aura that made Yi Zhifan unable to straighten his back. The old man's voice wasn't loud, but every word he said made Mayor Yi feel ashamed. Threatening a little girl, what? You can control the entire Fujian town with one hand, but you're a local tyrant. Chapter 236. What is Yi girl? The orphan of a martyr. Her mother's body was personally sent to the crematorium by the premier. Her pension was personally sent to the town by the head of the military commission. The prime minister had personally instructed that Yi Jian, the orphan of the martyr, must be raised into a talent. You say she's smart, but of course, with a smart mother, how can a daughter not be smart? It's because she's too smart and too kind that she tolerated your family time and time again. The vigorous voice had a great penetrating power. The surrounding students and teachers all heard it clearly. They really didn't expect Yi Qian to be the daughter of a martyr, and even more so that she even knew the premier. Yi Qian's heart felt like it was being pierced by thousands of sharp needles at that moment, piercing thousands of holes and dripping with blood. In her past life, Grandpa Zhen came looking for her. She was blind and rejected him. Later, when she escaped to the village, Grandpa Zhen came looking for her again. She was immature and thought that everyone would laugh at her, so she secretly ran away that night. In the end, she never returned to Shuka village and lived the life of being persecuted by Yi Ying until her death. Now that she thought about it, not only did she let herself down in her past life, she also let down the people who had high hopes for her. Uncle, let's talk outside. Yi Zhifan, who had become the most disgraced mayor in history, bowed slightly and didn't dare to act rashly. The bell is ringing. Let's not disturb the students in class. If there's anything, let's talk outside. He had lost a lot of face today. If this matter was blown out of proportion, the mayor position that he had been in for less than 15 days might very well be gone. The bell rang urgently. The surrounding students had no choice but to return to class under teacher Ku's yelling. Girl, go back to class. Grandpa is here. Let's see who dares to touch you. Uncle Zhen didn't want to disturb Yi Qian's studies. He turned around and said kindly, go back to class. Let Grandpa handle this. Things weren't that simple. If Yi Zhifan dared to make a move, then he dared to make a move. Yi Qian hesitated and pursed her lips. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Commander Yu secretly give her a hand signal. After a slight pause, she pursed her lips and smiled. Okay, then I'll go back to the classroom first. Please don't be angry, I'm really fine. If there's a problem. She leaned closer and smiled slyly. Yi Ying is the one who's in trouble. Don't worry, I won't let anyone bully her. The girl was right. She was no longer the taciturn person who could endure being taken advantage of in the past. Go to school quickly. Grandpa knows what to do. Seeing her smiling face, Lord Zhen also smiled happily. It's good that you didn't suffer any losses. It's good that you didn't suffer any losses. However, this wasn't a matter of whether they were at a disadvantage or not. They had to deal with it properly so that they wouldn't be disturbed every few days. He was right to come today. Yi Ying did not return to the classroom. Her face was pale as she clutched her chest. However, she secretly reminded Sun Dongqing, Mom, leave quickly. Don't cause trouble for Dad. Uncle Zhen is a respectable old man in the village. Dad doesn't dare to refute anything he says. Good girl, if you really leave, then it'll be even more difficult for your dad. Sun Dongqing was bad to others, but she protected her husband and daughter wholeheartedly. She was worried that if she left, Uncle Zhen would take her husband's life. She wasn't smart when she should be, but now she's worried. Yi Ying, who was full of resentment, wanted to curse out loud, but in front of her was her mother. No matter how stupid she was, she had to accept it. Chapter 237. She clenched her teeth and suppressed the anger in her heart. If we don't leave now, we'll be a burden to Dad. Mom, can't you see how bad Uncle Zhen's face is? Let's go. Then, she clutched her chest and started screaming in pain. She didn't give Sun Dongxing any time to prepare. She grabbed Sun Dongxing's arm tightly and gasped for air as if she would suffocate in the next second. Even if it was an act, it was too real. Even Sun Dongxing was scared and screamed. When Sun Dongxing heard Ying remind her to go to the hospital, she looked up at Yi Zhifan subconsciously. Then, she carried Ying on her back and ran towards the town hospital under the shocked gazes of the teachers and students. She should listen to her daughter. Old Yi was smart and nothing could stop him. She should leave first. When it came to running away, the mother and daughter were surprisingly similar. When Uncle Jen appeared, the family of three was indeed shocked and didn't dare to do anything rash. I can ask the driver to send her there. Secretary Wu, who witnessed the farce, wanted to chase after them but the imposing old man stopped him. You're Secretary Wu from the city's education bureau, right? Please stay. Principal Chin knew he didn't know him and reminded him in a low voice, first-rank sergeant major, a national treasure in the army. Secretary Wu was filled with respect when he heard that. When Yi Zhifan saw that his daughter finally got rid of the woman who would only be a burden, he was secretly relieved. If his wife really apologized to Yi Qian in front of the teachers and students, he would be so embarrassed that even a beggar would step on his face. In other words, Yi Zhifan didn't plan on apologizing at all. On the first day of school in Fujian Town Middle School, a huge incident happened. Mayor Ye's daughter was forced by her mother to the point where she almost jumped off a building. This incident was like a spring breeze that blew across the entire town. Even the villagers in Shuku village knew about it. There were many parents coming and going on the first day of school. Sun Dongxing was good at picking the day. Once she made a fuss, the entire town knew about it. To others, this was just a small chat after dinner, but to old Jen, it was the best time to settle an important matter. It was about changing Yi Qian's guardian before she became an adult. In Principal Chen's office, Uncle Jen was there. The atmosphere in the office was heavy. Even Secretary Wu was waiting for Uncle Jen to speak. Logically speaking, this matter should only be handled by little Yi. However, it's class time now, so we shouldn't delay her studies. Jen Laugen's words didn't break the tension in the air. Instead, it made a certain someone's heart jump with fear. Yi Zhifan smiled bitterly and said, "Uncle, it's true that my wife let Yi Qian down today, but her mouth ruined everything. She still cares a lot about Yi Qian. After all, she's her own niece." "Why, you don't have to use your lies on me. Everyone in the village knows how Sun Dongxing treated Yi Qian. Even if you try to twist the truth, it won't help." Uncle Jen interrupted bluntly. He didn't give the new mayor any face. "Even Secretary Wu knows about Yi Qian's relationship with your family. Mayor Yi, do you think there's a need to explain?" Yi Zhifan's expression stiffened. He could only smile bitterly and helplessly. "No matter what, Yi Qian is my niece. As her uncle, how can I mistreat my own niece?" Chapter 238. Time reveals a person's heart. I've given you 13 years, a few thousand days. I've seen through your heart. Uncle Jen came with a purpose. He wouldn't give him any chance to twist the truth. He wanted to remove Yi Qian's household register from Yi Zhifan's household register. If Major Xia hadn't called him last night, he wouldn't have thought of this. Getting into high school was fine, but the college entrance exam was out of the question. Especially when it came to military school, the household register had a lot to do with it. If Yi Zhifan used his status as Yi Qian's guardian to do something, it would ruin Yi Qian's future. Secretary Wu didn't quite understand why this first-grade sergeant major wanted him to stay, so he decided to listen and observe for the time being. Before he knew the reason, he wouldn't say anything. After a while, Uncle Jen stopped Yi Jifan from saying anything and asked Secretary Wu, I heard that Secretary Wu came here last time and found out that Mayor Yi was Yi Qian's guardian. That's why you came here personally, right? That's right. If it wasn't for the record, I wouldn't have known that Yi Qian's guardian was Mayor Yi. Secretary Wu, who was prepared, said calmly, do you have any questions? Otherwise, he wouldn't have suddenly mentioned the guardian. At this moment, Yi Jifan seemed to have thought of something. His pupils slightly constricted, and even the corners of his mouth began to tighten. Uncle Jen nodded slightly and said, I want to ask if the household register is changed and the guardian is changed to someone else. Can the record be changed? Yi Jifan clenched his fists. It was just as he had guessed. Uncle Jen wanted to remove Yi Qian's household register from his family. He wanted Yi Qian to have nothing to do with his family in the future. Of course it can be changed. It's not a big deal. Secretary Wu smiled and explained in detail. But a minor can't be the head of a household. Once the household register is changed, he must have a guardian until he reaches adulthood. Why did a minor need a guardian? This is related to the regulations in the law of minors in China. Combined with Article 16 of the General Principles of Civil Law and Article 53 of the Law on the Protection of Minors, parents are the guardians of minors in the first order, unless they die, lose their guardianship, or are deprived of guardianship. Yi Qian's parents had passed away, and her mother was a martyr. Then, as an orphan, her first guardian was her immediate family. She was under the legal guardianship of a designated relative. For the legal guardianship of specific relatives, the guardianship ability was a very important factor. Yi Jifan was the best candidate for legal guardianship of this specific relative. Now, if she wanted to move Yi Qian's household register out and change the legal guardian of a specific relative, it was still a little difficult. The court still needed to see if the second designated supervisor had the ability to supervise and protect the person, property, and other legal rights and interests of minors. What Uncle Jen needed to know was whether he could change the guardian on the file. Uncle Jen, are you saying that you want to remove Yi Qian's household register? Yi Jifan knew the answer. It was not his style to sit and wait. He crossed his arms and said calmly, the problem is, once the household register is removed, who will be her guardian? You. I'm afraid it's not suitable. Chapter 239. How could someone who was older and had one foot in the grave become a second guardian? Besides, they weren't related. Yi Qian, who had been standing outside the door for a while, knocked twice before pushing the door open. He looked at Yi Jifan and said calmly, it's not up to Mayor Yi to decide whether we're suitable or not. Although I'm still a minor, as a middle school student who already has a certain level of judgment, I can completely decide who my guardian is based on my own opinion. No one had expected that Yi Jian would actually appear at a time like this, and it caused everyone to be slightly stunned. As Grandpa Jen said, my relationship with Mayor Ye's family is obvious to everyone in Shuka village. If I ask the court to change my guardian and request to move my household registration, the court doesn't even have to make a discretionary decision. They can judge me on the spot. The 14-year-old was able to talk about matters that only adults could decide in an orderly manner. No one doubted that she didn't have a specific level of judgment. Yi Jifan pretended to think for a while before saying, this is no small matter. I still need to discuss it with your aunt. How about this, we can talk about it in a few days. What do you think? In the next few days, he had to make arrangements with the outside world and look for connections with the court. There's no need to talk about it in a few days. There are already relevant documents regarding the whereabouts of martyrs' orphans. Mayor Yi might as well read the Revolutionary Martyrs Commendation Ordinance that was issued on June 4, 1980. As the representative of the army, how could Commander Yu allow Yi Jifan to delay at such a critical time? He opened the document bag that he had been holding in his hand and took out a special document with the words XX Military Commission written in red and handed it to Yi Jifan. Mayor Yi, please take a look at this document. After you've finished reading it, you can sign it here. His tone was not one for discussion. It was clear that Yi Jifan had to sign it immediately after he read it. There was no other choice. If a mayor wanted to fight with an army, it was no different from throwing an egg at a rock. It was suicidal. Since Xia Jinyuan called to remind him last night, it meant that he already had plans. When he found out that Yi Jifan's family didn't have any familial ties with his little fox, he knew that in his absence, there might be hidden problems around his little fox that hadn't erupted yet. He had to get rid of them one by one. He said that he would protect his little fox. How could he go to the Snowfield Brigade without any arrangements? Yi Qian didn't know anything about his secret arrangements. When he saw that Commander Yu even took out the document from the army, he was amazed at the army's efficiency. It was just a thin piece of paper, but Yi Jifan's hand hurt when he held it. Who would dare not to disobey the army's decision? Who would dare to openly oppose it? Even if he had connections, it would be useless. No organization or department had the right to interfere with the military's decisions. Sign it, Mayor Yi. I still need to go to the city this afternoon to complete all the household registration procedures for little Yi. Commander Yu took out a pen from the inner pocket of his military uniform and handed it over. He smiled and said, "We can run errands for things like this. We won't cause any trouble for Mayor Yi. Don't think that they were all rough men in the army. They were all as astute as they should be." Chapter 240. Yi Jifan, who couldn't wait to swallow all the documents, raised his head and looked at Yi Jian with his shrewd eyes. He said in a deep voice, word by word, "Niece, you have to think this through. Once you move your household registration and change your guardian, I won't be able to help you if anything happens in the future." So it was premeditated. Even if his stupid wife didn't cause trouble today, moving her household registration and changing her guardian were things that would have happened sooner or later. If Mayor Yi didn't remind me, I would have forgotten. Facing his persistent questioning, Yi Jian smiled faintly and said, "If something really happens in the future, I only hope that Mayor Yi won't stand out to help me or anything. I'm really worried that you won't stand out to help me, but will instead hit me when I'm down." Yi Qian didn't quite understand why Uncle Jen suddenly proposed to move her household registration, but she knew what she should do at this time. No matter what Yi Jifan said, she wouldn't do as he wished. She would obediently listen to him and keep her name in his household registration booklet. She didn't have any objections to moving out. Moreover, Uncle Jen came prepared and came at such a good time. If she didn't settle the matter today and give Yi Jifan time to breathe, it would be difficult to do it again in the future. Her words made Yi Jifan's face even more pale and ugly, but Yi Qian ignored it. "Speak slowly. Of course, I won't give you the chance to kick me when I'm down." Just like today, the mayor's wife insisted that I acted inappropriately just because I didn't come back for the summer and met with a male student who was taking the exam with me yesterday. I was originally fine, but Mayor Ye's family just had to cause trouble for me. Yi Qian usually didn't speak much, but when he opened his mouth, his words were like knives. It was like a white knife going in and a red knife coming out. It hurt Yi Jifan so much that his internal organs were bleeding. No matter how unwilling he was, Yi Jifan had no choice but to sign. As soon as the last stroke of the name was written, Commander Yu took back the letter before the ink was even dry. He used a piece of paper to gently dry the ink and said with a smile, "Mayor Yi, don't worry. Other than Uncle Jen, all the soldiers in our troop are guardians. Even if something happens to little Yi, it will be our army that will take responsibility. We will definitely not trouble Mayor Yi. If you tried to reason with the soldiers, sometimes you were no match for them. Who would dare to reason with them when they were talking about the army? Looking at Yi Jifan's angry footsteps as he left, Yi Qian's eyebrows curved into crescents. His eyes were like the water in the moonlight, clear and clear with a hint of relief. In her previous life, it was precisely because her household registration was Yi Jifan's that she became a pitiful person without any identification. She couldn't find a good job and couldn't go to any night school. How could he not be happy now that such a huge matter had been resolved? Little Yi, from now on, you have nothing to do with his family. After today's incident, Ying won't be able to hold her head up in school. Just focus on your studies and don't let irrelevant people ruin your future. Uncle Jen, who was leaving, also said the same thing. They all hoped that Yi Qian would choose the right path and not let bygones be bygones and let bygones be bygones. This was also what Major Xia Jinyuan hoped for. Looking at the endless snowy mountains, his eyes were like snowflakes under the effects of altitude sickness. They were dazzling and cold, with a hint of majestic fighting spirit. This was the Snowfield Brigade's first training base. He would have a year of difficult, high-intensity, and high-risk training here. Chapter 241. While Yi Jifan was signing the papers, Xia Jinyuan, who was sitting in the truck, was jolted by the bumpy mountain road. He opened his eyes, which were slightly dazzled by the light from the snow. There was a 2-hour time difference between Beijing and the Snowfield Plateau, which was covered in white snow. Under the sunlight, everything was dazzling and bright. "Do you want to take some oxygen?" Someone turned sideways and asked calmly. His deep voice was so calm that there was no trace of anger. "The sea level is just over 5 kilometers. If you want to rest, let the car." In front of them, the rumbling sound of rolling rocks interrupted his words. The soldier driving the truck seemed to have predicted this and stepped on the brakes. He turned his head and smiled. "Q King, the Snow Mountain welcomes your arrival with an appetizer." Regardless of whether it was the soldier driving the truck or the soldier sitting beside Xia Jinyuan, they were all familiar with each other. The soldier driving the truck was J5, who always spoke lazily and casually with a sense of cynicism. The soldier sitting beside Xia Jinyuan was K7, a soldier with a medical background and the rank of captain. Xia Jinyuan opened the military water bottle and drank 2 mouthfuls of cold, snow-like water. He glanced at the gray-weathered rocks rolling down the mountain road and said calmly, "What an exciting way to welcome you. We are still a few hours away from the Ministry of War. We still have to repair the mountain road later. Can we pass it in half an hour? I don't know. We have to see how long the rocks will roll down. Sit tight. I have to go back a little bit first." In front of them were rolling rocks and the mountain road behind them was steep. On the left side, they could see a rapid river, which looked like a huge dragon. The mountain road was not an asphalt road or a cement road, but a gravel road. As the engine of the military truck turned, J5 nimbly and quickly turned the steering wheel. In less than 10 seconds, the truck had reversed several meters. J5 and K7 were both soldiers from the Snowfield Brigade. They joined the army 2 years before Xia Jinyuan. J5 graduated from the Army Academy, while K7 was a forensic doctor who joined the army halfway through his career. After the car was reversed and there was no sign of the rocks rolling down the road, the 3 of them took out crowbars from the toolbox and directly pried the biggest rocks from the roadside into the river. Listening to the sounds of the rocks rolling down the road, J5 secretly glanced at Xia Jinyuan, who was expressionless, and a hint of appreciation flashed across his eyes. The all-round soldier king, the king who took down the trump card Q in one fell swoop, was indeed a soldier with guts. K7 picked up the lever and threw it into his toolbox. He looked at the young major, who didn't even frown, and said coldly, "Much better than you." He always spoke inexplicably. If he didn't mention names, no one would know who he was talking about. Other people didn't know, but his comrade, J5, knew. "I'm much better than you. I still remember that you started vomiting on your first day when you were less than 5,000 meters above sea level. Your little face was so pale that it really made my heart ache." J5 smiled slightly and patted Xia Jinyuan's shoulder. He sighed and said, "Q King, I have high hopes for you. This kid has always been arrogant in the army. Before the brigade leader retired, we could still suppress him a little. Now, we're hoping for someone better to suppress his arrogance." As a new recruit to the Snowfield Brigade, even if Xia Jinyuan was a major, he couldn't put on airs in front of them. The Snowfield Brigade was a very special unit. The soldiers in it were nameless. No one knew where they came from, and no one knew where they were going. Even if they died, they were nameless heroes. Their code name was their name until they retired. Chapter 242. J5 and K7 only knew that Q King's surname was Xia. They didn't ask or care about his full name. Their code names were their names. No matter where they were, they could only contact their code names. Xia Jinyuan didn't know their names either. When he heard them, his thin lips curled up slightly. "I want to keep a low profile." That one sentence instantly turned J5 into a quiet, handsome man. As for K7, he revealed a smile thinner than the breeze. He turned his head to look at Q King, who was indeed keeping a low profile. His lifeless voice fluctuated slightly. "We all like to keep a low profile, unlike J5, who acts so high profile that he has to write a 3,000-word self-reflection letter tonight. I only spoke 3 sentences to a girl at the foot of the mountain. Which one of you got jealous and secretly snitched on me? Now I have to write another 3,000-word self-reflection letter. Damn it, I've already written a 12,000-word self-reflection letter this month." At this point, J5 had an innocent look on his face. Even his tone was full of resentment. He glanced at Q King, who had a faint smile on his face, through the rearview mirror. His eyes dimmed slightly as he sighed. "What a pity. You're worse than a monk once you enter the team. A monk can even say Amitabha to a female benefactor." As he sighed, Xia Jinyuan narrowed his handsome eyes slightly. Then, he said with a faint smile, "Don't worry, I'm still single. My family says that I'm too young to fall in love. I don't want to be cheated of my money and lose my virginity. So, I'm just like you, continuing to live the life of a monk. In the future, I don't think I'll be like J5, writing a 3,000-word self-reflection letter every now and then. Writing so frequently, it's more like I'm in heat." It was very quiet in the car. J5's face was wooden and expressionless. About 5 seconds later, K7 suddenly burst into laughter as if his laughing acupoint had been pressed. His previous lifeless appearance was gone. His laughter was bright and clear like the morning sun. J5 said in a wooden voice, "As far as I know, only male animals go into heat. I think Q King is right. You're also in heat. Otherwise, why can't you control yourself and want to talk to the girls? Isn't it just a male animal? Once it's in estrus, it can't control itself. As a result, it has to write a self-reflection every few days." K7's laughter was short, and when he spoke again, his face was still as calm as a mirror. The only thing that remained on his thin cheeks was the trace left behind by his laughter. Xia Jinyuan sneered. It was a unique way of reminding him to keep a distance from women. From this, it could be seen that the Snowfield Brigade was indeed as mysterious as the rumors said. They were like orphans without a home, and the only companions they had were their comrades. Thankfully, he had already made the most important arrangements for Little Fox before he left. In the coming days, even if he wasn't by her side, even if he couldn't contact her, he believed that with her ability, she would be able to handle any difficult matter beautifully. The sky was blue and the clouds were white. On the ground, the snow was white. In the car, Xia Jinyuan's smile was like a blooming lotus, clear and eternal. The mountain was getting higher and higher, and the road was getting more and more rugged. J5 and K7 didn't stop talking in the car. They took turns driving carefully, not daring to slack off in the slightest as they headed towards their first training base. Chapter 243. The only scenery that could be enjoyed in Fujian town and the snowy highland was the bright sun in the sky. Yi Jianyan, who was standing under the shade of the tree, was a little stunned. It was Xia Jinyuan who reminded Uncle Jen to relocate his household registration. Girl, when Major Xia comes back, you have to thank him properly. Luckily, he reminded me. Otherwise, no one would have thought of it. Uncle Jen, who did not know that Xia Jinyuan had already left Fujian town and was heading to a new unit, said earnestly, he has helped us so many times unconditionally. You can't not thank him at all. He had helped them so many times. If he did not thank him properly, he would feel bad. Upon hearing this, Yi Qian smiled and shook her head. It's okay, Grandpa General Major Xia came to Fujian town to train at the basic unit. After he's done, he will return to his original unit. In the future, he won't be coming back to us, so I'm afraid you'll have to wait a long time for him to thank you. She did owe him a thank you. If he had not reminded her in time and caught Yi Jifan off guard, she would have moved her household registration in one fell swoop. If Yi Jifan held on to her household registration like he did in her previous life, she would have to live without an identification card again and would be restricted everywhere she went. Yi Qian, whose heart was trembling slightly, calmed herself down and thought about the letter Principal Qin had given her. It only had 4 words, wait for me to come back. Wait for him to come back. Wait for him in Fujian town. And wait for him to come back. See you next time. She did not think too much about it. Wait for him to come back. You can think of it in a normal way or a more complicated way. When faced with such a dangerous man, she naturally avoided it and thought of it in a simpler way. In the end, she suddenly heard from Grandpa Jen that Xia Jinyuan had a lot to do with the smooth transfer of her household registration. It could even be said that he had solved the problem by himself. Then, Yi Qian rubbed her temples with a headache. She realized that even with 2 lifetimes of experience, her IQ was not enough to play a guessing game with Xia Jinyuan. If there was no such thing, then the 4 words he left her were like a friend going on a long journey, and she was waiting for good news. However, with his help, the meaning of these 4 words became somewhat ambiguous. What he hated the most was this kind of ambiguity that required guessing and guessing. Hearing this, old Uncle Jen fell silent. After a while, he nodded slightly and said, with Principal Xia's ability, he wouldn't stay here forever. Leaving is something that will happen sooner or later. I just didn't expect it to be so soon. As an all-round soldier, Xia Jinyuan had been assigned to Fujian town to fight against some outlaws. Firstly, the school had assigned him to the basic training, and secondly, Commander-in-Chief Xia wanted him to train his only son more. It had been almost a year. Even if Xia Jinyuan wanted to stay, Commander-in-Chief Xia would not allow it. Therefore, his departure was destined. It was a result that could not be changed. Faced with Grandpa Jen's sigh and his admiration for Xia Jinyuan, Yi Qian smiled faintly and said, "You don't have to feel that it's a pity. I won't be bad either. I definitely won't embarrass you and Principal Chin. That dangerous and elegant man had already left, but his brief appearance had left a deep impression on many people. In her life, because of his appearance, her memories of that year and that day were imprinted in her mind. Chapter 244. Fighting side by side on a rainy night, drawing a gun and killing people in a foreign country. These memories, filled with the flames and smoke of war, were all wonderful memories he brought to her. Actually, before she left Australia, she wanted to ask him how he dealt with the dozens of kilograms of poisonous powder that had been swapped, and how he dealt with those international police officers who were biased and looked down on Chinese soldiers, and how he retaliated against them. However, based on his personality and the bravery of a Chinese soldier, he definitely wouldn't let those arrogant megalomaniacs off so easily. You don't have to worry about the hornless dragon Jade. This isn't something that can be explained in a few words. Although it's valuable, it's just a dead object in your hands. If Yi Shifan and his family try to hide it, little girl, you. Uncle Jen didn't know how to bring up the hornless dragon Jade, but as he spoke, he noticed that the little girl was looking up at him. Her left hand was gently caressing the silver wire that was wrapped around her right wrist. Her gaze was pierced through the mottled sunlight and the twinkling leaves. She was lost in her thoughts as she stared at it. This little girl, when it came to serious matters, she could still be lost in her thoughts. Yi Qian's mind was filled with memories of fighting side by side with Xia Jinyuan. She blinked, her dewy, obsidian eyes were still a little dazed. Suddenly, she pursed her lips and lowered her head in embarrassment. I thought of something. I didn't hear what you said just now. I'm sorry, Grandpa Jen. Her hand that was caressing the silver wire quietly lowered and hung naturally by her side. Seeing this, Uncle Jen laughed. I know. You're thinking of Major Xia, right? He was old, but he wasn't blind. However, after laughing, Uncle Jen's aged face turned serious. But little girl, regardless of whether you're thinking of him or not, you're still too young. There are some things that you can't just rely on your feelings alone. Regardless of what Major Xia thinks, you still have to take care of yourself. There was a hint of sadness in Lord Jen's eyes, as if he was recalling something that made him sad. No matter how powerful a girl is, she will always be at a disadvantage when it comes to love. Uncle Jen carefully looked at the calm little girl and smiled again. But, I don't think you're the kind of girl who would easily fall in love with you. If that guy really likes you, he's going to fall in love with you. This was also why Uncle Jen did not interfere even though he noticed that Xia Jinyuan treated Yi Qian differently. Don't worry. No matter how outstanding Major Xia is, he's still someone else's Major Xia. It has nothing to do with me. Yi Qian was indeed open-minded. She had always been an indifferent person. She had been through so much, and had even survived the calamity of death. How could she be so easily swayed? After brushing it off with a smile, he asked about the hornless dragon Jade. You seem to have mentioned the hornless dragon Jade earlier. Is there something I don't know about it? That jade is valuable, but it's not a good thing. If Yi Shifan doesn't give it to you, don't take the initiative to ask for it. Our focus is on moving out of our household register. Material things don't matter. To Yi Qian, what Uncle Jen said was the most important thing. As for the matter with Xia Jinyuan, it didn't matter. Hearing this, she smiled and said, okay. Whether the jade was valuable or not was not Yi Qian's main concern. Since it wasn't a good thing, of course she wouldn't take it. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.